Hey everyone, tonight we'll delve into the strangest version of a story. You think you know the king who turned the world to gold, yet discovered a curse no eye could see? We hear the hush of distant wind over pine and stone, the soft tapping of a reed against another reed by a moonlit river, and the faintest glimmer of a crown that might be real or only the echo of a myth. You probably won't want to believe what you are about to hear, because it suggests that the most dangerous curses don't glitter, they hide in silence. In breath, in the space between heartbeat and whisper. So, before the tension gets too high, take a moment to like the episode and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there, because tonight's story crosses time zones as effortlessly as it crosses centuries. Now, close your eyes, imagine the ancient mountains, and let's unravel this epic tale together. What if King Midas's worst affliction was never the gold you could see, but the truth you couldn't? You stand at night beside the Pactolus, a river once famed for its glittering sands, hearing the rhythmic lap of water against polished stones, the cautious chirr of crickets, and the lingering aroma of resin and wild thyme. The moon hangs low above Mount Tmolos, that ridge of old Anatolia where judges once claimed they could hear perfection, and the reeds around you rustle as if gossiping among themselves. In the distance, a single owl gives a measured call, like a priest intoning a verdict. You reach down, tasting the cool air like metal on the tongue, and you feel a tremble in your chest you can't name. In Greek mythology, Midas is the king whose wish turned to catastrophe. But tonight, you're invited to walk closer, to listen for a different catastrophe, the hushed one, the one that doesn't shine. The ancient mysteries don't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes they seep through soil, find a root, and become a voice that no gate can silence. Imagine you are on the sacred mountain of decision, the kind where deities stroll as if they own the moonlight. An immortal ambitious, afraid, and more than a little proud asks for a gift that sounds like triumph. What would you do if you discovered that your victory was engineered to measure your hearing more than your touch? You crouch by the water, and a startling thought lands. The curse of Midas was not an end, but a doorway. The gold that made bread shatter and wine seize was only the bright half of a coin, whose darker face was shame, concealment, and the trembling fear of laughter. As you hold your breath, a gust slides through the reeds, and you hear, or think you hear, a sentence with no speaker. He wanted the treasure that could be counted, and received the weight that could not be weighed. Here is a fact that anchors your feet to the earth beneath the legend. In central Anatolia, at Gordian, archaeologists opened a giant burial mound tumulus Emmamophan called the Midas Mound. Inside, they found a timber chamber preserved by the pressure of centuries, a royal corpse laid among feasting vessels and remnants of a funerary meal. The wood smelled of antiquity, the bronze shone in uneasy sleep, and the evidence whispered that there was once a monarch whose name could outlast his flesh. But even kings share space with peculiar gods. Remember this Dionysus, giver of wine. Loosener of burdens, walks the night with a fennel staff tipped by a pinnacone. The thyrsus, a symbol so gentle and so strange it might be a joke that only immortals understand. The thyrsus looks like a party favor until it becomes a scepter for undoing dignity, reminding heroes and rulers alike that ecstasy can strip a person bare with a touch as soft as ivy. You imagine it gleaming faintly in the moonlight, sticky with sap, light enough to wield, heavy enough in meaning to bend a man's pride. Listen to the audio of the landscape. The Pactolus under starlight murmurs as if counting coins you cannot see. A fox pads along the far bank. Somewhere a shepherd shifts in sleep, dreaming of heroes, wary of deities. Norse legends will echo later with their ring curses and hordes that ruin families, and you will feel the convergence, gold as doom in tales separated by sea and time. But this river in Lydia carries a very local memory. For generations people said its sands bore gold. Because of a divine exchange and from such glimmering sediment, the Lydians minted wealth that taught the world to trust stamped metal more than trust itself. Every sound around you rings with a ledger that is not written down. The unseen curse, though, do you feel it yet? It lives where your fingers end and your breath begins. It's in the way your shoulder tenses when you imagine keeping a secret too large to hold, but too perilous to release. It's the psychology of concealment. Once you hide a part of yourself, The world narrows to the circumference of your disguise, a slow suffocation behind a polite smile. You picture a king who sleeps with a cap by his bedside, who wakes to the faint brush of woven cloth against skin, who learns that even in solitude he performs a role for an audience that might never arrive. A reed knocks a reed, and the sound is oddly syllabic, like letters being invented by accident. You realize that voices can live in things that have never had lungs, and messages can carve themselves into wind. This is the territory of ancient mysteries, where the boundary between psyche and sound dissolves, and the chorus of the landscape carries the residue of choices made by trembling hands. If you lean in, you can almost make out the syllables. But the river guards its rhythm, the mountain keeps its counsel, and the night insists on patience. We will move step by careful step, because suspense grows best when watered with restraint. You will meet a lenient god, a wandering satyr, bargain that sounds like mercy, and a banquet that petrifies into a sculpture of hunger. You will watch shame settle like a shadow on a brow, and you will hear a secret that can't stay buried. You will meet heroes and deities as neighbors in a provincial court of fragile power, and every scene will hum with the question that turns myth into mirror. What part of you would rather be adored than understood? A detail returns, the thyrsus sticky with sap, its pinacone like a small armored heart. It is almost comic, almost holy. Lytle the honest plow, the soldier's bronze. It does not threaten, it invites, and in that invitation there is a cliff. You hold the image for later, because you will need it when gifts begin to curdle. Meanwhile, consider this other thread the legends preserved. Mount Tmolus, the arbiter between Pan and Apollo, will appear again, and when it does, you will already know that mountains listen longer than men. The moon crests, the owl hushes, the Pactolus thickens with reflection, and your heartbeat steadies to the cadence of an old story, remembering itself out loud. If you could ask the night a single question, what would it be? Would you ask for wealth? For victory? For the good opinion of the crowd? Or for the right to walk unafraid without the armor of applause? The first rustle of destiny is just that trussel, no trumpet, no sudden blaze, merely a shift in how the air feels on your skin. And then the whisper arrives, small, almost sheepish, as if embarrassed to carry such importance. Ask for the golden touch. But the question that remained was this: when the god finally stands before you, smiling like forgiveness, will you hear the warning in his generosity, or only the glitter in your own voice? The question hangs in the air, a vapor of pure potential, and then the scene crystallizes around you. You are no longer by the river, but in a rose garden, thick with a perfume so heavy it feels like a presence. The moonlight here is softer, filtered through the leaves of Midas's famous garden, a place where the scent of blossoms is said to cure melancholy. You hear the rustle of fine robes, the clink of a distant wine cup, in the low, contented humming of a creature that is more than animal and less than god. Before you, slumped against a mossy fountain, is Silenus, the old satyr, his bald head gleaming, his face creased with the wisdom of 10,000 hangovers. He has been found, lost in a drunken stupor, and treated with the reverence due to the tutor of a deity. And now the deity has come to collect him. Dionysus does not arrive with thunder or a chorus of angels. He simply appears. One moment you see only shadows beneath a gnarled olive tree. The next, he is there, leaning against its trunk. He is younger than you expect, with eyes that hold an ancient, unsettling mirth. They are the color of dark wine, and seem to see not just you, but the desires coiled inside you. A wreath of ivy and grape leaves is tangled in his dark curls, and in his hand, he idly twirls the thyrsus, that odd fennel stalk scepter you remembered from the riverbank. Its pinecone tip seems to gather the moonlight. The air shifts, suddenly charged with the scent of wild mint, crushed grapes, and the damp earth of a forest floor after a storm. He smiles at Midas, a slow, appreciative curve of the lips. You have shown my old teacher kindness, King of Phrygia. The god's voice is not loud, but it fills the space, a low resonance that seems to vibrate in your bones. It is the sound of honey in summer and the distant rumble of a landslide. For 10 days, you have housed and honored him. Name your reward. Whatever you wish, it shall be yours. You watch Midas, his breath catches. This is the moment. the pivot upon which his name will turn for all eternity. He is a good king, they say, but a king nonetheless, a man who measures his rain and harvests, tributes, and the weight of his treasury. His eyes fixed on Dionysus have a feverish gleam. You can almost hear the frantic calculation in his mind, the ambition that has been simmering for years now boiling over. He straightens his shoulders, the fabric of his robes whispering against the flagstones. He doesn't ask for a stronger army, a longer life, or wisdom to rule. He asks for the world melted down into a single manageable substance. "Grant me," Midas says, his voice tight with hope, "that whatever I touch shall turn to gold." A profound stillness settles over the garden. Even Silenus seems to stir from his stupor, one eye cracking open to watch. Dionysus's smile doesn't falter, but something in his gaze shifts. It's a flicker of something ancient and sad, the weary look of a parent who knows the lesson a child is about to learn can only be learned through pain. He takes a step forward, the soft leather of his sandals making no sound. "A dangerous wish, Midas," the god murmurs, his tone gentle, almost conspiratorial. "Oh, are you certain?" Some gifts are prisons disguised as thrones, but Midas cannot hear the warning. He hears only the echo of his own desire. He sees a future paved, walled, and crowned with sunlight. He nods, his whole body rigid with certainty. "I am certain," Dionysus sighs, a sound like leaves skittering across stone. "So be it." He raises the thyrsus, not in a grand gesture, but with the casual air of a man pointing out a landmark. "Go and enjoy your Midas touch." And just like that, the bargain is sealed. The air loses its electric charge. Dionysus helps the groaning Silenus to his feet, and together they melt back into the shadows from which they came, leaving behind only the lingering scent of wine and wildness. Midas stands alone for a moment, his heart hammering against his ribs. Is it real? Was it a dream? His eyes fall upon a low-hanging oak branch. He hesitates, his hand trembling. Then, with a surge of adrenaline, he reaches out. His fingers, warm with life, brush against the rough bark. There is no sound, no flash of light. Instead, you witness a silent, creeping transformation. The deep brown of the wood hardens and brightens. The green of the leaves stiffens, their veins turning to filigree. A wave of shimmering yellow flows from his fingertips up the branch, chasing the life out of it, replacing it with a cold, metallic beauty. He pulls his hand back. The branch, now solid gold, hangs heavy and motionless, its golden leaves tinkling faintly in the breeze, like tiny dead chimes. Midas gasps. A wild, exultant laugh escapes his lips. He snatches a stone from the path. It warms in his palm for a second, before turning into a perfect, gleaming nugget. He plucks a rose from its stem, and its velvet petals become thin, brittle sheets of precious metal, the perfume vanishing in an instant. He is a child with a new power, a creator of sterile wonders, and he is utterly intoxicated. You watch him race from the garden, his robes flying behind him, his laughter echoing through the silent palace. A man running toward his own doom with open arms. In Phrygia, there was another powerful deity Midas would have known, Cybele, the great mother whose worship involved loud, clashing music and ecstatic dances performed by her priests, the Koribants. This historical practice of using overwhelming sensory input to achieve a divine connection stands in stark contrast to the silent internal curse Midas has just chosen. He has opted for a wealth that deadens sound, that stills motion, that erases scent, and Dionysus, the lenient god. He is not always so gentle. A bizarre and telling detail of his mythology involves a crew of Tyrrhenian pirates who, failing to recognize the deity, attempted to kidnap him. In response, Dionysus transformed their ship's oars into serpents, filled the air with the sound of phantom pipes, and caused vines to engulf the mast. The terrified sailors leaped overboard, and as they hit the water, he turned them into dolphins. This is the god who granted Midas's wish, a being of whimsical, absolute, and terrifyingly creative power, whose mercy and punishment are often indistinguishable. You are left standing in the silent, moonlit garden. One branch of a living oak tree is now a monument to a foolish prayer. Its golden leaves stir, but they do not rustle. They clink. The sound is unnatural, sterile, and deeply, deeply wrong. The unseen cost has already begun to accrue, not in a ledger, but in the slow subtraction of life from the world. Midas believes he has been given the power to create treasure. But the question that remained was, what is the true nature of a bargain with a God who has seen everything, and who grants a wish not to reward you but to teach you the true meaning of what you asked for? His laughter, a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph, carries him from the garden into the heart of his palace. You follow a shadow in his wake as he glides through the corridors, his hands outstretched like a conquering messiah. He brushes his fingers along a heavy wool tapestry depicting a hunt. The woven threads stiffen and gleam, the vibrant dyes replaced by the cold monochrome sheen of gold. A servant, bowing low, offers a silver ewer of water. Midas, in a fit of glee, taps its side. The silver groans and transmutes, becoming a golden vessel of immense weight, the water within it sloshing, still blessedly liquid. He has not yet touched the water itself. The servant scrambles back, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. The king is a living miracle, a walking mint, a man who has bent the rules of the universe to his will. He sweeps into the grand dining hall, a chamber already opulent, but soon to become a testament to his newfound divinity. He has called for a feast, and his servants, trembling, have provided it. You stand in the arched doorway, the air rich with the aromas of celebration. The savory scent of roasted lamb seasoned with rosemary and garlic, the warm, yeasty smell of freshly baked bread, the sweet perfume of figs and dates piled high in wooden bowls. Torches crackle in their sconces, their flickering light dancing across platters of olives, wheels of sharp cheese, and amphorae of deep red wine. It is a scene of life, of sustenance, of earthly pleasure. Midas, beaming, takes his seat at the head of the long table. He gestures expansively, a king surveying his domain. He is starving, not just from the day's excitement, but with a profound, soul-deep hunger for the culmination of his dream. To be surrounded by limitless wealth and to enjoy the fruits of the earth. This, to him, is the definition of power. He reaches for the simplest of pleasures, a piece of bread, still warm from the oven. The moment his fingers close around the soft crust, you see the change. It is not instantaneous, but a horrifying, creeping petrification. The golden brown surface hardens, its texture shifting from porous and yielding to dense and metallic. The soft, white crumb becomes a rigid, glittering sponge of solid gold. He brings it toward his mouth, the familiar, comforting weight now strangely heavy in his hand. The scent of baked wheat vanishes, replaced by the faint, cold smell of metal. He hesitates, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. He puts the golden bread back on the table with a dull clunk. A nervous laugh escapes him, an anomaly. He turns his attention to the main course, a platter of succulent roasted boar, its skin crisp and glistening. He carves a slice with a silver knife which promptly turns to gold in his hand and lifts the tender meat with his fingers. Act again, the silent, inexorable transformation. The soft, yielding flesh resists, then succumbs, becoming a solid, unchewable sculpture of the morsel it once was. The rendered fat congeals into tiny, frozen droplets of golden amber. His smile falters, then vanishes completely. A knot of dread begins to tighten in his stomach, a cold counterpoint to the gnawing hunger. Panic begins to set in. Looks around the table at the vibrant colors, the promise of flavor and life, and sees only a gallery of future statues. His throat is dry. He needs to drink. He seizes his goblet, already transformed to gleaming gold, and a servant rushes to fill it with wine. He lifts the cup, his hand shaking now. He tells himself that the curse is in his touch, his skin. If he can just pour the liquid into his mouth without his fingers making contact with it, he will be saved. He tilts the goblet, and a stream of ruby-red wine arcs toward his waiting lips. But the curse is more intimate than he ever imagined. It is not just in his skin. It is in his very being. The moment the wine leaves the golden chalice, the stream itself begins to solidify. You watch, transfixed, as the flowing liquid hardens in midair into a glittering, rigid ribbon of metal. It clatters against his teeth, a beautiful, useless cascade of solid gold that splashes onto the table and floor, not as a liquid but as a shower of hard, tinkling beads. A terrible strangled sound is torn from Midas's throat. He stares at the inedible feast, the congealed wine, the wealth that surrounds him like a tomb. His hunger is a ravenous fire in his belly, but his hands can only create stone. He is a living Tantalus, forever reaching for the sustenance that turns to mockery at his touch. This is not the grand treasure of Greek mythology you have read about. This is a slow, methodical starvation, a body devouring itself from the inside out while trapped in a cage of its own making. The echoes of this kind of cursed wealth reverberate through other ancient mysteries. In Norse legends, the dwarf Andvari's cursed ring, in Veranot, brought ruin to every one of its possessors. From the dragon Fafnir who hoarded it to the hero Sigurd who claimed it, the treasure itself was poison, breeding greed and paranoia. Midas, however, did not steal his curse. He prayed for it. He has become his own Fafnir, hoarding a treasure that offers no nourishment, only a cold, heavy burden. And what of the gods? The Aegis, the legendary shield or cloak of Zeus and Athena, offers a bizarre point of comparison. It was a divine instrument of terror, often described as being fringed with writhing live snakes, and bearing the horrifying head of Medusa, capable of turning armies to stone. It was a symbol of absolute terrifying power. Midas's hand has become a mundane domestic Aegis, turning not armies, but his own dinner to a state of permanent death. Historically, this is a profound irony. Phrygians, Midas's own people, were celebrated throughout the ancient world for their masterful woodworking and furniture making, creating intricate inlaid tables and thrones that were prized possessions in Assyrian and Greek palaces. Their craft was one of nuance, skill, and an understanding of living materials. Midas's touch is the antithesis of this craft. It is a crude, artless magic that erases all detail, all life, all purpose, reducing everything to a single uniform, dead substance. The king pushes himself away from the table, his chair scraping against the stone floor. The hall is silent save for his ragged breaths. The smell of the feast is still in the air, a phantom tormenting him with what he can no longer have. He looks at his hands, the source of his infinite wealth, and his absolute misery. He has conquered the material world only to be exiled from it. He is the richest man in history, and he is starving. The physical agony is immense, but a new, more dreadful fear is beginning to dawn. The curse has taken his food and his drink. It has animated his fear. But the question that remained was, what would happen when this power, this affliction of gilded death, was not aimed at bread or wine, but at something that breathes and loves him back? He flees the dining hall, a gilded prison of aroma and failure. You follow his frantic, stumbling steps down a long, torchlit corridor. He is not running toward anything, but away from himself, from the two hands he holds out in front of him as if they were venomous snakes. A sob tears through him, a raw, ragged sound of a man breaking apart from the inside. It is a sound of pure, primal despair, the cry of a soul, realizing it has traded its connection to the living world for a sterile, glittering hell. The sound echoes off the polished marble floors and high vaulted ceilings, a solitary note of agony in the opulent silence of the palace. From a doorway ahead, a small figure emerges, roused by her father's cry. It is his daughter. The storytellers will give her names Marigold, Zoe Butt, in this moment. She is simply the singular focus of his love, the one part of his world that is more precious than any metal. She is a child, her face framed by dark curls, her eyes wide with concern. She sees her father, the great king, doubled over in sorrow, and does what any loving child would do. She runs to him. Father. Her voice is a silver bell in the heavy air. What is it? Are you hurt? A new, more visceral terror seizes Midas. It is colder and sharper than the dread in the banquet hall. He throws up his hands, not to embrace her, but to ward her off. No, he chokes out, the words strangled by panic. Stay back. Don't touch me. But his warning comes too late. She does not understand. She sees only his pain and wants only to soothe it. She throws her small arms around his waist, pressing her face into the rich fabric of his robes in a hug meant to comfort, to heal, to bring him back to himself. For a single, eternal second, nothing happens. He feels the warmth of her body, the familiar pressure of her embrace, the soft tangle of her hair against his side. It is a moment of pure, desperate hope. Perhaps the curse has limits. Perhaps love is its antidote. And then it begins. You watch as a ripple of change flows from the point of contact. It is not a flash, but a slow, silent wave of deathly alchemy. The living warmth of her skin under his hand vanishes, replaced by a deep, unnatural cold that seeps into his own flesh. The soft fabric of her dress stiffens, its folds freezing into rigid, metallic drapery. The dark silk of her hair brightens, coarsens, and solidifies into a cascade of fine golden wires. He pulls back his hand in horror, but the transformation has its own momentum now. The flush in her cheeks hardens into a polished sheen. Her eyes, which were looking up at him with love and confusion, lose their depth, their light, their life, becoming perfect, inlaid gems of amber or jade, beautiful and utterly vacant. Her last breath is caught in her chest, never to be released. She does not cry out. There is only a profound, spreading stillness. She is no longer his daughter. She is a statue. A perfect, life-sized, exquisitely detailed statue of a girl hugging her father, rendered in solid gold. She is impossibly heavy, a dead weight of treasure that pulls him to his knees. He stays there for a long moment, his arms still half encircling the cold, unyielding form. The silence in the corridor is absolute. Even the torches seem to crackle more softly, as if afraid to disturb the sanctity of his grief. The rumors that will eventually ripple through the kingdom and down through the centuries are a pale simplification of this moment. The storytellers will say a king wept over the golden statue of his child. But you are here, and you see the truth is far more complex and terrible. His grief is too deep for tears. It is a catatonic shock, a hollowing out of his soul. He has not just lost his daughter, he has become her murderer. He is Pygmalion, in reverse, turning life into art, warmth into stone. This act of unwilling creation echoes a dark, historical reality in Midas's own Phrygia. The most powerful deity in the region was Cybele, the great mother goddess. Her male priests, known as the Galli, would work themselves into a religious frenzy and, in a supreme act of devotion, castrate themselves, sacrificing their fertility and future lineage to serve her. In this gilded hall, Midas has performed a similar, though unintentional, sacrifice. He has severed his own bloodline, rendered himself sterile as a father, all for a different kind of deity, the god of gold. He looks at the statue, this monument to his greed. It is a strange and bizarre artifact now, a sacred object of horror. Reminds you of the Omphalos at Delphi. The carved stone considered the navel of the world, the central point of all existence. But where the Omphalos was a symbol of life and connection, his daughter has become the cold, dead center of his own world. A golden navel of grief around which his life will now revolve. And so the king must weigh his grief against the perception of his glory. Servants saw. Whispers have already begun their journey through the palace. Does he collapse in public agony, admitting the catastrophic folly of his divine gift? To do so would be to reveal his weakness, his foolishness, to a court and a kingdom that thrive on the myth of his power. Or does he do something even more monstrous? Does he pretend this was his intention? Does he display this golden child as the ultimate symbol of his Midas touch, a testament to a power so great it can bestow gilded immortality upon his own flesh and blood? The choice is between being a fool or being a monster. He rises slowly, his joints stiff, his face a mask of incomprehensible sorrow. He looks at the beautiful, terrible thing that was once his daughter, a perfect memorial that contains no memory. He has created the most valuable object in the world, and it has cost him everything of value. The gold is no longer a gift or a curse. It is a verdict. But the question that remained was, when love itself becomes a cold, precious object, does the love die, or does it simply haunt the treasure, waiting for a chance to be set free? He does not choose, he cannot. The human mind, when faced with a paradox of such magnitude, being both the richest king and the most destitute father, simply breaks. For days you watch him wander the palace, a ghost in his own home. He does not eat, for he cannot. He does not speak, for words have lost their meaning. He avoids his own reflection, for he cannot bear to see the face of his daughter's killer. His hands are his tormentors, wraps them in layers of fine linen, binding them to his chest as if to restrain a pair of captured animals. But he can still feel the power thrumming within them, a low, malevolent hum waiting. The palace, once a place of bustling life, becomes a museum of his folly. Every chair he has sat on, every cup he has touched, every door he has opened stands as a gleaming golden monument to his error. His world has become an exhibition of his own damnation. The servants, terrified, leave his food on trays far from his reach and flee. They whisper in shadowed corners, their eyes darting toward the silent golden figure of the princess, which has been moved to her chambers, a beautiful corpse laid in an eternal bed. The kingdom of Phrygia, once governed by a competent and respected ruler, is now adrift. The king is catatonic, lost in a gilded labyrinth of his own making. His salvation, when it comes, arrives not in the form of a hero or a sage, but as a dream. Or perhaps it is a memory, a faint echo of the god's parting words. Rising through the fog of his despair, Dionysus. The name surfaces in his mind, a single point of light in the suffocating darkness. The god who gave him this curse is the only one who can take it away. It is a desperate, fragile hope, but it is enough. He finds his voice a dry, rasping whisper and commands his most trusted attendants to prepare him for a journey. He must find Dionysus. He must beg for mercy. His pilgrimage takes him east, back toward the lands where the god was said to wander. You journey with him, feeling the rough ground beneath the sandals, the bite of the wind, the gnawing hunger in his belly. He travels not as a king, but as a penitent, his royal robes traded for a simple tunic, his head bowed. His hands remain bound, a constant physical reminder of his sin. He follows whispers and rumors, tracing the path of the god's cult from village to village. He sees the remnants of their ecstatic rites, discarded ivy wreaths, empty wineskins, the lingering scent of wild celebration. He is an outcast from this world of life and joy, an observer of the very vitality he has lost the ability to touch. Finally, in a sun-drenched valley, nestled at the foot of Mount Tmolus, he finds him. Dionysus is lounging by a stream, surrounded by his usual retinue of satyrs and maenads. The air is alive with the music of pipes and the laughter of his followers. The god looks up as Midas approaches, his expression unreadable. He shows no surprise, only a deep, ancient knowing. Midas falls to his knees on the riverbank, his body racked with exhaustion and starvation. He does not have the strength to speak, so he simply unwraps his hands. He holds them out, palms up, offering them for judgment. They are pale and trembling, instruments of unimaginable power and unbearable grief. Dionysus rises and walks toward him. The laughter and music of his followers die down, replaced by a watchful silence. The god looks at Midas's hands, then into his eyes, and what he sees there, the fathomless well of suffering, the complete and utter brokenness, seems to move him. His face softens with a look of genuine pity. Your lesson has been a harsh one, King of Phrygia, the god says, his voice a low, somber murmur. You have learned that the hunger of the soul cannot be fed with gold. I will grant you release from your gift, relief so potent it is almost painful. Washes through Midas. He waits for the god to perform some grand magical act, to snap his fingers and undo the curse. But Dionysus's methods are ever rooted in the natural world. Go to the river that flows from this mountain, the god instructs, gesturing toward the stream beside them. Trace it to its source, where it springs from the rock. There plunge your head and body into the fountainhead, and wash away your crime and its punishment. The river is the Pactolus, the very same river you stood beside at the beginning of this journey, its sands not yet glittering. Midas, his strength renewed by this glimmer of redemption, rises and stumbles upstream. You walk with him, the sound of the rushing water growing louder, a sound of purification, of absolution. He climbs over rocks and through thickets, his gaze fixed on the mountain above, the source of both his torment and his hope. He finally reaches the place where the Pactolus springs from the earth, a grotto where water gushes from a fissure in the rock, cold and crystal clear. Without hesitation, he wades into the pool, the icy water a shock to his feverish skin. He plunges his head beneath the surface, scrubbing at his face, his hair, his body. And then he submerges his hands, holding them open in the current, an act of surrender. You witness the magic leaving him. A faint golden shimmer bleeds from his fingertips, caught by the current and swirled away downstream. Yes. It is like pollen being washed from a flower, a fine, glittering dust that dissolves into the water. He feels the thrumming power within him subside, replaced by a simple, profound emptiness. He is just a man again. He lifts a wet stone from the riverbed. It remains a stone, cold, gray, and wonderfully real. He weeps, his tears mingling with the water of the river, his relief a raw, cleansing flood. A bizarre detail of this myth is that some versions claim the power of the Midas touch was not destroyed but merely transferred. The curse was washed into the river, and the river itself became imbued with the golden touch. This is the ancient explanation for why the sands of the Pactolus River were so rich with electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. Historically, the wealth of the Lydian kingdom, which later conquered Phrygia, was built upon the gold panned from this very river. King Croesus, a historical figure, renowned for his immense wealth, would mint the world's first standardized gold coins from the bounty of the Pactolus. The myth provides a divine origin story for a geological fact, suggesting that the very foundation of an empire's economy was born from a king's washed-away sin. Midas emerges from the water, shivering but reborn. He is no longer a creator of dead treasure. He is hungry, he is mortal, he is free, he can touch the living world again. But as he turns to leave, his heart full of a fragile, newfound peace. He has no idea that he is walking away from one curse and directly toward another, one that is unseen, unheard, and far more insidious. He has offended one god with his greed, and he is about to offend another with his opinion. The gold has been washed from his hands, but the folly, it seems, remains in his heart. But the question that remained was, what happens to the golden statue of his daughter? Does the magic recede from her as well? The myths are silent, leaving you with a haunting, unanswered image. A king cleansed of his curse, returning to a palace where a perfect, priceless, and permanent monument to his greatest love and deepest shame waits for him in an empty room. He returns to his kingdom a changed man. The palace is still a partial museum of his folly, with its golden tapestries and gilded furniture. But he leaves them as they are a constant, necessary reminder. He rules now with a newfound humility, his ambition tempered by the memory of starvation and the silent golden form of his daughter, which remains a statue, a permanent fixture of his grief. The stories say Dionysus's mercy was incomplete, or perhaps that some transformations are too profound to be undone. The king finds a strange peace in the quiet rhythms of a life free from catastrophic magic. He rediscovers the simple tactile pleasures he once took for granted, the rough texture of a clay cup, the warmth of a sun-drenched stone, the soft fur of a loyal hound resting at his feet. He has been to the abyss and back, and he is content with a world that does not turn to metal in his hands. But the quiet does not last. Fate, it seems, has another lesson for him, a test not of his greed, but of his judgment. You find yourself on the slopes of Mount Tmolus, the very mountain whose river cleansed him. The air is warm and still, fragrant with pine and wild lavender. A natural amphitheater is formed by a gathering of ancient moss-covered rocks. A crowd has assembled local nymphs, river gods, and a few wary mortals who have dared to venture into this sacred space. They have come to witness a contest, a duel of music that will pit the rustic against the divine, the wild against the refined. On one side sits Pan, the goat-footed god of the wild, of shepherds and flocks. He is a creature of rough-hewn charm, his bearded face alight with mischief, his horns glinting in the sun. He holds his famous pipes, a simple instrument fashioned from a handful of hollow reeds bound together with wax. It is a tool of the earth, capable of producing melodies that are at once chaotic, mournful, and intoxicatingly joyful. His music is the sound of the untamed wilderness, of whispering forests and lonely hillsides. On the other side sits Apollo, the radiant god of music, poetry, and prophecy. He is the embodiment of divine perfection. His form is flawless. His golden hair seems to capture the sunlight itself, and his eyes hold the calm, confident certainty of a being who has never known a moment of doubt. He cradles his lyre, an instrument of breathtaking beauty, its frame of polished tortoiseshell and its strings like filaments of captured light. His music is order, harmony, mathematics made audible. It is the sound of celestial spheres turning in perfect synchrony. The contest begins. Pan goes first. He raises the pipes to his lips, and a melody pours forth that is wild, untamed, and deeply alive. You hear in it the bleating of sheep, the rustle of wind through the grass, the frantic, joyful dance of a spring festival. It is a music that speaks to the blood, that bypasses the mind, and goes straight to the heart. It makes the nymphs want to dance, and the river gods tap their stony feet. It is honest, earthy, and full of a raw, untutored beauty. When he finishes, the air hums with the energy of his song. Then, it is Apollo's turn. He does not begin immediately. He allows the echo of Pan's music to fade completely, creating a space of pure expectant silence. Then, he plucks a single string on his lyre. The note hangs in the air, a perfect, crystalline sound of such purity that it seems to cleanse the very atmosphere. He begins to play, and the world is remade in harmony. His music is not a description of nature. It is the underlying principle of nature itself. You hear in it the precise geometry of a snowflake, the elegant arc of a planet's orbit, the inevitable logic of sunrise and sunset. It is a music of breathtaking skill and intellectual grandeur, a demonstration of divine order imposed upon the chaos of the world. It is, by any objective measure, perfect. When he finishes, there is a stunned silence. The audience is mesmerized, awed by the sheer technical and artistic brilliance they have just witnessed. The judge of the contest, the mountain god Temulus himself, rises. His voice is the sound of shifting rock and ancient wisdom. The verdict is clear. He declares Apollo the victor. The crowd murmurs in agreement. The nymphs sigh. The river gods nod their solemn assent. It is an obvious, undeniable conclusion. Apollo's music was superior in every conceivable way. But one voice disagrees. Midas, who has been sitting quietly among the spectators, rises to his feet. Perhaps it is his newfound appreciation for the simple, the rustic, the unadorned. Perhaps his ordeal has made him suspicious of all things that glitter, whether with gold or with divine perfection. Or perhaps it is simply a moment of profound, catastrophic misjudgment. I disagree, he says, his voice clear and firm, ringing out in the hushed amphitheater. The crowd turns to stare at him. Apollo's gaze, cool and sharp, fixes upon him. Pan's music was the truer of the two. It had more heart. It was a song of life, not of cold perfection. A gasp ripples through the crowd. To contradict the judgment of a mountain god is foolish. To publicly declare the music of a rustic satyr superior to that of the god of music himself is an act of breathtaking arrogance or naivete. Apollo's calm expression does not change, but a dangerous light flickers in his eyes. He looks at Midas, not with anger, but with a kind of clinical curiosity, as if examining a strange, flawed specimen. He glides toward the king, his movements as fluid and graceful as his music. You have a fine appreciation for the vulgar, it seems, Apollo says, his voice soft, yet carrying a chilling edge. But your ears, king of Phrygia, are clearly defective. They are not fit for a human who should be able to recognize divine artistry. They are better suited for an animal that cannot distinguish between the sublime and the base. This moment brings to mind a bizarre historical detail about musical contests in ancient Greece. They were deadly serious affairs. The Pythian Games at Delphi, held in honor of Apollo, featured musical competitions as their main event, with the winner receiving a crown of laurel leaves. To lose was a profound dishonor, and to challenge the verdict was unthinkable. Midas is not just stating a preference. He is violating a sacred cultural and religious protocol. Furthermore, consider the strange nature of Apollo's own symbols. While he is the god of light and clarity, one of his sacred animals was the wolf. A creature of the wild, the night, the very chaos Pan represents. His epithet, Lykios, could mean wolf god. This shows the complex, often contradictory nature of the Greek deities, who contained their own opposites. Apollo, the god of order, had a deep primal connection to the very wildness he outwardly disdained. Midas stands his ground, unaware of the cosmic offense he has just committed. He has listened with his heart, not his intellect, and has spoken his truth. He has survived the curse of gold, which appealed to his greed. Now he faces a curse born from his own sincere, if flawed, aesthetic judgment. He is made an enemy of the god who oversees prophecy, who sees all things under the sun, and who does not suffer fools gladly. But the question that remained was, what form of punishment does a god of perfect harmony devise for a man whose ears have failed him so completely? Apollo does not strike him. There's no bolt of lightning, no divine fury made manifest in fire or storm. The punishment, when it comes, is as quiet and precise as the music from his lyre. He simply glides forward until he stands directly before Midas, his presence so radiant it is difficult to meet his gaze. The air around him seems too thin, too sharpened. The god of light, of clarity, of unsparing truth, leans in, his voice a confidential whisper that is somehow for Midas alone, yet heard by the silence of the entire mountain. An ear for music requires a discerning shape, Apollo murmurs, his tone one of mock sympathy. Let me fix yours. He reaches out, his fingers long and elegant. He does not touch Midas with anger, but with the delicate, chilling precision of a surgeon. A thumb and forefinger, light as a moth's wing, brush against the lobe of each of the king's ears. Midas feels not pain, but a sudden, intense heat. A tingling that races up the cartilage, followed by a sensation of pulling, of stretching, of his own flesh becoming pliable as warm wax. It is a deeply unnatural feeling, a violation at a biological level. He feels his ears elongating, reshaping themselves, growing upward and outward with a silent, inexorable momentum. He hears the world differently now, the sound of the wind suddenly muffled and strange, the frantic beat of his own heart seeming to echo inside a cavern. The god steps back, a faint, cruel smile playing on his perfect lips. There, he says, his voice resuming its normal, resonant volume. Now you have the ears to match your judgment. Apollo turns and walks away without a backward glance, his lyre catching the sun as he disappears into the trees, leaving behind a silence more damning than any accusation. The nymphs and river gods stare at Midas, their expressions a mixture of pity, terror, and a kind of morbid fascination. Midas, his hands trembling, slowly raises them to the sides of his head. He doesn't need a mirror. His fingers trace the new shape, the long, thick, velvety texture, the unmistakable curve and twitching tip. They are the ears of an ass. A wave of cold shame, more profound and sickening than any grief he felt for his golden daughter, washes over him. The gold curse was a tragedy, a grand epic misstep. This is a humiliation. It is a joke. He, Midas, king of Phrygia, a man whose name was synonymous with wealth and power, has been made a grotesque caricature. He has been marked not as a sinner, but as a fool. He can feel the ears twitching involuntarily, reacting to the faintest sounds, a constant, living testament to his folly. He cannot bring himself to look at the assembled crowd. He turns and flees, stumbling down the mountain, his new appendages seeming to catch the wind like absurd, fleshy sails. His journey back to the palace is an agony of self-awareness. Every rustle of a leaf, every bird call is amplified, a cacophony funneling into his ridiculously sensitive new ears. He walks with his head bowed, his hands clapped to the sides of his head, a posture of madness and despair. When he finally reaches the privacy of his chambers, he collapses, his reflection in a polished bronze shield showing him the horrifying truth. The ears are long, gray, and tipped with tufts of coarse hair. They are undeniably, comically, the ears of a donkey. His first desperate instinct is to hide. Not just from his court or his kingdom, but from himself. He cannot cut them off. The thought alone makes him feel faint, and he knows that God's magic cannot be undone by a simple knife. He must cover them. He ransacks his wardrobe, his hands shaking until he finds what he needs: long strips of fine linen, and more importantly, a Phrygian cap. This is the moment the unseen curse truly begins. The Phrygian cap was a real and common article of clothing in his kingdom, a soft conical hat with a distinctive forward-flopping peak. It was worn by his subjects, a simple piece of regional attire. Now, for Midas, it becomes his salvation in his prison. You watch as he painstakingly arranges his monstrous ears, folding them down against his skull, before carefully winding a turban or pulling the toll. Soft cap over them, tucking away every last trace of his shame. The daily ritual is born. From this day forward, he will never be seen without it. He will sleep in it. He will rule from his throne wearing it. The symbol of his people becomes the mask for his deformity. It's a historical irony that this very cap used here to hide a king's shame would centuries later become a potent symbol of liberty during the French and American revolutions, worn by freed slaves and revolutionaries to proclaim their freedom from tyranny. For Midas, it is the exact opposite, the emblem of his enslavement to a secret. This punishment reveals a particularly bizarre and cruel aspect of Apollo's character. When the satyr Marsyas dared to challenge him to a musical contest and lost, Apollo's punishment was brutal and direct. He flayed Marsyas alive. It was an act of raw, visceral dominance. But with Midas a king, Apollo chooses a more refined, more psychological torture. He does not mar Midas's face or body in a way that would elicit pity. Instead, he gives him a feature that invites ridicule. He knows that for a king, the fear of being laughed at is a far heavier burden than the pain of a wound. He has cursed Midas with a secret that must be perpetually guarded, turning his life into a performance of normalcy, haunted by the constant gnawing fear of exposure. The king's world shrinks to the circumference of his cap, becomes paranoid, watchful. A sudden gust of wind is a threat. A friendly pat on the shoulder is a source of terror. He withdraws, his newfound humility curdling into a fearful, guarded isolation. He sits in his court, dispensing justice, his face a calm mask, while beneath his royal headwear, the long, hairy ears twitch and listen, a secret source of endless torment. But the question that remained was, how long can a secret of this magnitude truly be kept, especially when it is a living, breathing part of you, a truth that by its very nature wants to be heard? The king's life becomes a masterpiece of concealment. You watch the careful choreography of his days, the subtle adjustments and avoidances that define his new reality. He perfects the art of wearing the Phrygian cap, learning to secure it so tightly that not even a sudden turn of his head or a strong gust of wind can dislodge it. He develops a regal stiffness, a way of moving that minimizes any risk of his secret being revealed. His court, accustomed to his post-gold cursed sobriety, simply sees this new, rigid formality as a deepening of his wisdom, a kingly gravitas. They do not know it is the posture of a man balancing a terrible, invisible weight. He avoids intimacy. He keeps his counselors at a distance. He speaks less, listens more, a cruel irony, given the state of his ears. They twitch and itch beneath the fabric, a constant, maddening reminder of his humiliation. He can hear everything. The whisper of a courtier across the hall, the scuttling of a mouse behind the wainscoting, the nervous flutter of a petitioner's heart. His world is a cacophony of amplified sounds, but the one sound he fears above all is the gasp of discovery, followed by the roar of laughter. But there is one person who must, by necessity, be allowed into the sanctum of his secret. One person whose duties require a proximity that cannot be avoided, his royal barber. For weeks, Midas lets his hair grow, his paranoia making him put off the inevitable. But a king cannot appear unkempt. The moment arrives. He summons his barber, a man who has served him for years, a simple, loyal servant whose life has been one of quiet, unassuming service. The barber enters the king's private chambers, his tools a bronze razor, shears, a bowl of water neatly arranged on a small tray. He is a man of routine, expecting another routine trim. Midas sits on a stool, his back to the door, his heart hammering in his chest. The room is silent except for the crackle of a small brazier. The king waits until the door is sealed, the heavy tapestries drawn. Then, with a shaking hand, he reaches up. You witness the moment of revelation from the barber's perspective. You see the king, his shoulders tense, slowly, reluctantly, lift the Phrygian cap. The barber's breath catches in his throat. It is a moment of pure, disbelieving shock. Where the king's normal human ears should be, there are two long gray, hairy appendages folded awkwardly against his skull. They twitch slightly in the open air, as if tasting their brief freedom. The barber freezes, his razor held aloft. His mind struggles to process what he is seeing. It is impossible. It is grotesque. It is, he realizes with a jolt of terror, a divine secret. He understands in an instant that his life now depends on his reaction. He looks from the monstrous ears to the king's reflection in a polished silver mirror on the wall. He sees the raw, pleading terror in Midas's eyes. It is not the look of a king demanding silence, but of a man begging for it. The barber's training, his years of servile deference, take over. He swallows hard, his throat clicking. He gives a short, jerky nod, his face a carefully constructed mask of utter neutrality. He says nothing. He simply steps forward and begins his work, his hands moving with a practiced, albeit trembling, precision. He carefully trims the hair around the base of the unnatural ears, his razor cold against the king's skin. The silence in the room is deafening, broken only by the soft snip of the shears and the barber's own ragged, shallow breathing. Every touch is a risk, every moment an exercise in supreme self-control. When he is finished, Midas, without a word, replaces his cap, pulling it down firmly. He turns, his eyes locking with the barber's. He reaches into a pouch and pulls out a handful of gold coins, remnants of a different life. A different curse hand presses them into the barber's hand. It is not a payment, it is a bribe. It is a seal on a pact of silence. The barber bows low, backing out of the room, his mind reeling. He has been entrusted with the king's shame. He is the sole living mortal to know the truth. And the knowledge is a poison. From that day on, the barber lives in a state of constant gnawing anxiety. The secret is a physical weight in his mind, a hot burning pressure behind his eyes. He is terrified of the king, knowing that a single slip of the tongue could mean his death. But the secret itself wants to be told. It is too big, too strange, too monumental to be contained in the mind of one ordinary man. It is a psychological paradox. The intense need to suppress a thought only makes that thought more powerful, more insistent. The secret screams for release. You watch as the barber's life unravels. He becomes jumpy and withdrawn. He talks in his sleep. In the marketplace, he opens his mouth to haggle for olives and finds himself on the verge of shouting, "The king has ass's ears." He clamps his mouth shut, his heart racing, sweat beading on his forehead. At home, his wife asks him what troubles him, and he can only shake his head, his eyes wide with a terror she cannot comprehend. The secret is a living thing inside him, scratching at the walls of his sanity. This internal struggle is a perfect illustration of what modern psychology calls the ironic process theory, or the white bear problem. Try not to think of a white bear, and you will be able to think of nothing else. The barber's desperate effort to suppress the secret of the king's ears ensures that it dominates his every waking thought. The king's curse has found a new host. The shame, once contained beneath the Phrygian cap, has now leaked out, infecting the mind of a simple, innocent man. Midas had sought to contain his humiliation, but in doing so, he has merely outsourced its psychological torment. The burden of the unseen has been transferred. A bizarre detail from some regional folklore suggests that barbers in the ancient world were sometimes associated with spies and gossip mongers, their access to powerful people, making them conduits of information. This barber, however, does not want to be a conduit. He wants only to forget. But the pressure continues to build. The secret needs an outlet. It is a bubble of air trapped deep underwater, rising inexorably toward the surface. Something has to give. The barber knows he cannot hold it in any longer. He feels himself on the verge of cracking, of screaming the truth in the middle of the crowded agora. He needs to release it, but how can he do so without betraying his king and forfeiting his life? But the question that remained was, if a secret is too dangerous to tell a person, can it be told to the earth itself? Can a confession whispered into the mud ever truly stay buried? The secret is a sickness inside the barber, has a weight, a temperature, a pulse. During the day, while he shaves the chins of merchants and soldiers, the words burn on his tongue. The king has ass's ears. He finds himself gripping his razor until his knuckles are white, terrified the phrase will spill out with a slip of his hand. At night, he dreams of the king's twitching, hairy ears, and wakes up in a cold sweat, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He has been paid for his silence, but the price of holding the secret is his own peace of mind. The king's curse has metastasized, and he is its new, unwilling host. He knows he is going to break. The pressure is building, a psychological crescendo that must find its release. He feels the frantic energy of an animal trapped in a cage. He needs to tell something. But who? His wife would be implicated. A friend would become a co-conspirator. A stranger would spread the tale like wildfire. The paradox is absolute. To speak is death, but to remain silent is madness. One evening, unable to bear the confines of his own home, he walks out of the city, following the familiar path toward the Pactolus River. The moon is a sliver in the sky, offering little light. He is drawn to the water's edge, the place where his king once washed away a different curse. The air is cool and damp, and the only sound is the gentle lapping of the river and the rustle of the wind in the reeds that line its bank. And then an idea strikes him. It is not a logical, reasoned thought, but a desperate primal urge. He cannot tell a human. But the earth. The earth is vast and silent. The earth can hold a secret. You watch him, a man possessed by a frantic need. He drops to his knees in the soft, muddy soil a few feet from the water. He looks around wildly, his eyes scanning the darkness. There is no one. He is alone with the river, the sky, and the secret that is devouring him. He begins to dig, not with a tool, but with his bare hands, clawing at the damp ground, scooping out handfuls of wet earth until he has made a small, dark hole. He leans down, his face close to the opening, can smell the rich, loamy breath of the hole, the scent of decay and life mingled together. He presses his lips to the cool, dark rim of the earth, and with a shuddering gasp of relief, he confesses. He whispers the words that have been torturing him, letting them flow out of him and into the silent ground. King Midas has ass's ears. He breathes into the darkness of the hole. King has the ears of a donkey. He says it again and again, the words losing their terror with each repetition becoming just sounds. A torrent of whispered confession pours into the earth, emptying his mind of its poison. When he is done, he feels light, hollowed out, blessedly empty. The pressure's gone. He sits back on his heels, his breathing ragged, his hands caked in mud. For the first time in months, his mind is quiet. With a newfound sense of calm, he carefully pushes the dirt back into the hole, patting it down until the ground is smooth again. He has done it. He has released the secret without betraying his king. He has confided in the one entity he believes can be trusted to never speak of it again. He rises, wipes his hands on his tunic, and walks back to the city, a man who believes he has found a loophole in a curse. But the earth is not a tomb for secrets. It is a womb. And the seed of the barber's whisper has been planted in fertile ground. Spring arrives. Along the riverbank, the spot where the barber dug his hole sprouts a thick, vibrant clump of reeds. They grow taller and greener than their neighbors, swaying with an unnatural vigor. They seem to draw a special kind of life from that particular patch of soil, a vitality born of a buried truth. This is poetically just, for river reeds were the source of ancient communication. The first pens kalami used by Greek and Roman scribes were fashioned from dried reeds, their hollow cores carrying the ink that made words visible. These reeds, however, are destined to give voice to a word that was meant to be invisible. One afternoon, a shepherd boy, leading his flock to the river to drink, rests near the vibrant clump of reeds. A breeze sighs across the water, and as it passes through the tall green stalks, the shepherd hears a sound. It is not the usual dry rustle. It is a sibilant, rhythmic whispering. She shurs. He frowns, looks around, but sees no one. He dismisses it as a trick of the wind. But the wind blows again, a little stronger this time, and the reeds bend and sway, their chorus becoming clearer, more articulate. The sounds are no longer random. They are syllables, shaped by the passage of air through the hollow stems that grew from a whispered secret. The shepherd's eyes go wide. The wind is speaking. The reeds are singing a song. Midas has ass's ears. The whisper is unmistakable. It is soft, pervasive, and chillingly clear. It is as if Hermes himself, the messenger god, whose winged sandals carry news across the world, has decided to use the landscape as his personal broadcast system. The secret, once the burden of a single, terrified man, has been given to the air. It is no longer a confession, but a proclamation. The barber's attempt to bury the truth has only given it roots, and now it has grown 1,000 whispering tongues. But the question that remained was what happens when a secret is no longer a burden to be carried by one man, but becomes a song sung by the world itself? And what will the king do when his deepest shame becomes the whisper on every breeze? The shepherd boy, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, scrambles away from the riverbank and runs back to his village. He tells his family what he heard. They laugh at him. A child's fantasy. But his story is too strange, too specific, to be easily dismissed. A few curious villagers wander down to the river to see for themselves. They stand by the clump of unnaturally lush reeds, and they wait. The wind, an accomplice to the gods, obliges. King Midas has ass's ears. King Midas has ass's ears. The whisper is undeniable. It is faint, but it is there, woven into the sound of the breeze. A nervous laugh, a shocked gasp, the secret begins its journey. The villagers tell their neighbors, travelers, stopping to water their horses, overhear the whispering reeds and carry the strange tale with them to the next town. The news spreads, not like a shout, but like a contagion. A rumor carried on the very air everyone breathes is the perfect, untraceable dissemination of a truth that was meant to be buried forever. The curse has now fully evolved. You can trace its metamorphosis, a terrifying progression from the tangible to the intangible. It began with gold, a curse of substance. Midas wished for a physical thing, and its power was expressed through physical contact. His hands, his body, were the conduits. The curse was a solid, glittering reality that could be seen and weighed, a prison of heavy metal. He was saved by washing it away, a physical act of purification. Then the curse became shame, an affliction of the self. Apollo's punishment was not a physical burden, but a mark of ridicule. The donkey ears were a feature to be hidden, a source of internal torment. The prison was no longer external, but internal, a psychological cage built of paranoia and fear. The curse was contained by a physical barrier, the Phrygian cap, a thin wall of fabric holding back a flood of humiliation. Now, the curse has become sound. It has escaped the confines of the king's body and the barber's mind. It has become an environmental phenomenon, a piece of information woven into the fabric of the world. The prison is now everywhere. There is no wall high enough, no cap thick enough, to keep out a whisper that is carried on the wind. Midas, who once commanded a world that turned to silent, dead gold at his touch, is now haunted by a world that has come alive with a single mocking sound. Exposure, the very thing he dreaded most, has become the penalty, and it is a penalty that no gate can stop and no guard can silence. Imagine you are Midas, sitting on your throne. You have managed for a time to find a fragile peace in your concealment. But then, one day, a window is left ajar, and a breeze drifts into the throne room. And on that breeze, you hear it. It's faint, almost imagined, but there. The sibilant whisper. Midas's, Haas's, ass's ears. Your blood runs cold. You signal for the window to be closed, your hand trembling slightly. You tell yourself you were imagining it. But you hear it again a few days later, from a different direction. You begin to see changes in your courtiers. A sideways glance. A quickly suppressed smile. Conversation that stops abruptly when you enter a room. The air in the palace becomes thick with unspoken knowledge. They know. They don't know how they know, but the rumor has seeped through the stone walls. As pervasive and unstoppable as the air itself, the curse has achieved a new, more terrible form. It is no longer just about Midas. It is about the nature of information itself. The barber's confession was a single data point, planted in a system, the Earth, that was designed to replicate and broadcast. In this, the myth is eerily prescient, a perfect ancient allegory for the modern concept of viral information. A secret, once released into the network, can no longer be controlled. It replicates, mutates, and spreads through countless nodes, first the reeds, then the shepherds, then the villagers, until it becomes ambient, a part of the background noise of the world. A strange historical parallel exists in the Pasquinades of Rome. From the 16th century onward, anonymous satirical verses and political criticisms would be secretly attached to a specific ancient statue in the city, known as Pasquino. It became a public outlet for forbidden speech, a way for the populace to gossip about the powerful without fear of reprisal. The statue itself became the city's whisper, giving voice to what everyone was thinking but no one dared to say. The reeds of the Pactolus have become the Pasquino of Phrygia, a natural, organic platform for broadcasting the one truth the king cannot bear to hear. And what of the gods? This form of punishment, turning the landscape into a witness and a voice, has a bizarre precedent. In some tales, Echo, the nymph cursed by Hera to only repeat the last words spoken to her, eventually faded away from grief until only her voice remained, haunting mountains and valleys. Apollo, with his characteristic precision, has inflicted a similar but more targeted fate upon Midas's secret. He has not cursed Midas to fade, but cursed his shame to echo forever, turning the natural world into an instrument of his psychological torture. The god of music has composed a symphony of humiliation, with the wind as his orchestra and the reeds as his choir. Midas is now trapped in a prison of sound. He can no longer find peace, even in solitude. The silence of his own chambers is pregnant with the whisper he expects to hear at any moment. His large, sensitive donkey ears, once the source of his shame, have now become the perfect receptors for his punishment. He is exquisitely tuned to the frequency of his own humiliation. He hears the whispers more clearly than anyone. Apollo's curse was not just the ears themselves, but the guarantee that he would be the primary audience for the ridicule they inspired. But the question that remained was, when a king's authority rests on perception and awe, what happens to his power when his deepest vulnerability becomes common knowledge, a joke told by the grass and the wind? Can a crown maintain its weight when everyone knows about the ridiculous ears hidden beneath it? The whispers are a ghost that haunts the air itself. Midas, the king who once commanded a silent golden world, is now immured in a world that speaks his shame. The Phrygian cap, once his desperate private solution, must now become a public statement. It is no longer enough to simply wear it. He must redefine it, weaponize it, turn his shield into a fortress that extends across his entire kingdom. You stand in the royal court of Gordian, and you feel the change. The cap is no longer just on the king's head. It is everywhere. Midas, in a stroke of desperate political genius, has elevated this simple piece of felted wool into a symbol of national identity and loyalty. Issues edicts praising the traditional Phrygian bonnet. He rewards courtiers who wear it with particular prominence. He commissions statues of legendary Phrygian heroes, all depicted wearing the distinctive forward-flopping cap. It becomes a uniform. To wear the cap is to signal allegiance to the king. To appear bareheaded is to seem foreign, disloyal, perhaps even sympathetic to the whispering wind. For Midas, the cap is a suffocating torment. You can almost feel the constant itching pressure of the wool against the sensitive skin of his grotesque ears, the clammy dampness of sweat trapped beneath the fabric. The daily act of putting it on is a ritual of surrender, a moment when he acknowledges his own self-imposed prison. Yet in public he wears it with a rigid, unassailable pride. He has turned the instrument of his humiliation into his scepter of authority. By making everyone wear his mask, he hopes to render his own invisible. He is hiding in plain sight, a man disappearing into a crowd he himself has created. And here lies one of the most profound ironies of history, a truth stranger than any myth. This very object, the Phrygian cap, this emblem of a king's private shame and desperate concealment, will be reborn centuries later as the ultimate symbol of liberty. You can see it now, a soft red cap, the bonnet rouge, perched on the heads of revolutionaries, storming the Bastille. You see it held aloft on a pole, a beacon of freedom in the newly formed American Republic, placed on the heads of emancipated Roman slaves to signify their release from bondage. The Roman pileus, a similar felt cap, was the mark of a freedman, a citizen who had broken his chains. Over time, the Phrygian cap borrowed this meaning, becoming the most potent visual shorthand for liberation in the Western world. Midas uses the cap to conceal his enslavement to a god's curse. The world will one day use it to proclaim its freedom from the tyranny of kings. The object remains the same, a simple piece of cloth, but its meaning is inverted. Midas tries to control the narrative, to force the cap to mean loyalty, but a symbol is stronger than any one man's intention. It absorbs the hopes and dreams of the many, and in time, it will forget the secret of the one. This desperate attempt at concealment brings to mind a far more powerful mythological artifact, the Helm of Darkness. Known as the Kidney of Hades, it was a cap forged by the Cyclopes that rendered its wearer completely invisible.
Ow.
The Lord of the Underworld used it to move unseen. The hero Perseus wore it to approach Medusa without being turned to stone. The helm of darkness was an instrument of absolute erasure, a perfect cloak of non-existence. Midas's Phrygian cap is a failed helm of darkness, does not make him invisible. On the contrary, it makes him hypervisible. It is a constant public declaration that he has something to hide. It draws the eye, invites speculation. Every person who looks at the king on his throne sees not just a monarch, but a man defined by his headwear. The cap does not erase him. It is a spotlight disguised as a shadow. While Hades' helm allowed its wearer to see the world without being seen, Midas' cap forces him to be seen while being consumed by the fear of what others might know. The king, in his paranoia, can almost feel the stares of his subjects burning through the wool, trying to glimpse the monstrous truth beneath. You watch him now, presiding over his court. A petitioner stands before him, wearing the now obligatory cap. The king's face is a stony mask of regal indifference. But his hands, hidden beneath the folds of his robe, are clenched into white-knuckled fists. His donkey ears, sharp and sensitive, twitch beneath their woolen prison. Picking up the faintest sound of a stifled cough at the back of the hall, the rustle of a robe, the whisper of the wind at the high window. Every sound is a potential threat, a new wave in the endless symphony of his ridicule. He is a king besieged by acoustics. His authority is a performance, his crown a lie, and his entire kingdom has been conscripted into the theater of his denial. But the question that remained was, who truly decides what a symbol means? Is it the king who wears it to hide his shame, or is it the people who will one day wear it to proclaim their freedom? And can a lie, even one worn by everyone, ever truly silence a truth that is sung by the earth itself? The kingdom is a symphony of whispers, and Midas is its unwilling conductor. His authority, once rooted in respect and wealth, now rests on a fragile foundation of enforced conformity, the ubiquitous Phrygian cap. But he knows it is not enough. Shared uniform cannot entirely deafen a shared rumor. Power, he realizes, is not just about hiding weakness. It is about projecting strength in a form so undeniable it commands belief. He needs a new magic, not one from the gods, but one forged by human hands and royal will. His gaze, and yours with it, falls upon the kingdom's treasury. It is filled with the bounty of the Pactolus River, not just gold dust, but lumps of electrum, that pale, greenish gold alloy he knows so well. This is the residue of his first curse, the washed-away sin of his greed, now sitting in inert, shapeless piles. For years, trade has been conducted with this raw material, weighed on scales, its value debated in every transaction. It is a system built on negotiation and mutual suspicion. It is messy. It is human. And Midas, in his new fragile state, despises it. He needs certainty. He needs control. An idea sparks an echo of his old ambition, but refined by his suffering. He will not turn the world to gold, but he will master gold itself. He will give it a voice, his voice. He will take these formless, untrustworthy lumps and impose his will upon them. You are in the royal mint, a place of fire, hammers, and the rhythmic clang of metal on metal. You watch the birth of an idea that will change the world. The electrum is melted down, purified, and cast into small uniform blanks, each one carefully weighed to a precise standard. The weight is no longer a matter for debate. It is a declaration. But the final step is the true act of alchemy. A blank is placed on an anvil. A die carved with an image is set on top. A heavy hammer falls. Clang, you step closer to see the result. The once blank piece of metal is now alive with meaning. It bears an image. It is the mark of the Lydian kings who held power over Phrygia, the head of a roaring lion. Its mouth is agape, its teeth bared in a silent, permanent snarl. Beside it, a sunburst, a symbol of divine right. This is not a picture. It is a promise and a threat, it says. The value of this metal is guaranteed by a power as fierce as a lion, as absolute as the sun. It is the birth of coinage. This historical fact is the anchor of the moment. Here in Lydia and Phrygia in the 7th century BCE, humanity learned to trust a picture more than the substance it was stamped on. The Lydian lion coins, minted from the electrum of the Pactolus, were the world's first true currency. Now, You are in the marketplace of Gordian. The air smells of spices, livestock, and dust. A farmer holds one of the new coins in his calloused palm. He is selling a goat. In the old days, the buyer would have poured gold dust into a small scale, and they would have haggled over the weight. Today, the buyer simply hands him this small stamped disc. The farmer hesitates. He looks at the snarling lion, feels its unfamiliar standardized weight. He is not being asked to trust the metal. He is being commanded to trust the king. The fear of being cheated by a merchant is replaced by the fear of defying the state. The coin is a tiny portable piece of the king's authority, silent decree that travels from hand to hand, rewiring the very nature of trust. This act of creation mirrors the work of the divine smith, Hephaestus, in a bizarre and telling way. The lame god, a master of artifice, was said to have forged a set of golden handmaidens to assist him in his workshop. They were not mere statues. They were automata, endowed with strength, intelligence, and even the power of speech. They looked and acted like living beings, but they were constructs, their vitality an illusion of perfect craftsmanship. These new coins are Midas's golden handmaidens. They are lifeless pieces of metal brought to a semblance of life by the force of his authority. They speak of value. They move through the economy. They serve the kingdom. But they are an artifice. They're worth a story impressed upon them by a hammer. For Midas, this is a profound and desperate act of psychological transference. He cannot control the story being told about his own body, the rumor of his ears whispered by the reeds. So he creates a new story, one he can control, and stamps it onto the world. The lion's roar is his answer to the wind's whisper. The unblinking solar glare of the stamp is his answer to the sideways glances of his court. He cannot erase the mark of Apollo's ridicule on his flesh, so he imposes his own mark on the economic flesh of the kingdom. It is a desperate attempt to shout down his own shame. He sits alone in his chamber, a single coin in his palm. It feels cool and heavy. It does not radiate the terrible, life-leeching power of his old curse. This is a different kind of power, cold, calculated, and symbolic. He turns it over and over, his thumb tracing the image of the lion. He has taken the dregs of one god's punishment and forged them into a shield against another S. He has learned that you do not need to turn the world to gold if you can control what gold means. But the question that remained was when a king replaces the tangible trust between people with a trust in his own stamped image, does he build a kingdom, or does he merely construct a more sophisticated, more orderly prison of fear? The coin is cold and certain in the king's hand. The lion's roar is a silent scream of authority, an attempt to impose order on a world that has become chaotic and untrustworthy. This need for absolute control, for a single, clear narrative, sends his memory in you, along with it spiraling back to the very foundation of his city, another symbol of power that sits in the heart of his acropolis, a puzzle of wood and bark that has defied the cleverest hands for generations. You are standing in the citadel of Gordian, for you protected from the elements within a temple dedicated to Zeus, is an ancient ox cart. It is crude, its wooden wheels worn, its axle groaning under the weight of its own history. This is not just any cart. It's the vehicle of destiny. Legend holds that Midas's own father Gordius was a simple farmer. Oracle had declared that the next man to enter the city driving an ox cart would become king. Gordius, fulfilling the prophecy, arrived, and in gratitude for his miraculous ascension, he dedicated his cart to the gods. He fastened the yoke to the pole with a knot of such bewildering complexity that no one could see how it was tied. You move closer. The knot is a gnarled, massive fist of rope. It is not made of simple hemp, but of cornel bark, a material known for its toughness, which has hardened over the centuries into something resembling wood. There are no loose ends, no visible beginning or end. It is a perfect, self-contained system of loops, twists, and coils, a three-dimensional riddle. And attached to it is another oracle, a promise whispered down through the ages. Whoever can unravel this impossible knot shall become the ruler of all Asia. Midas has stood before this knot countless times. It is his legacy, the emblem of his family's improbable rise to power, yet it mocks him. He who craves order and control is confronted by a symbol of absolute, impenetrable complexity. The stamped coin in his pocket is a statement of simple, brutal authority. The knot is a testament to a truth so tangled it resists comprehension. It is a metaphor for his own life. His secret, the grotesque ears hidden beneath his cap, is his personal Gordian knot. It is a shameful, tangled problem with no visible end, a puzzle he cannot solve, only conceal. The prophecy of world domination hangs over this. Not a grand prize for solving a puzzle, yet he is paralyzed by the much smaller, more intimate knot of his own body. Oh, let the centuries fall away. The air in the temple grows thick with anticipation. It is the year 333 BCE. The ox cart is older, the knot harder, more brittle. A new figure stands before it. He is young, restless, radiating an aura of electrifying impatience. This is Alexander of Macedon, his army resting nearby as he sweeps across Asia. He has heard the prophecy. His generals and advisors stand behind him watching. They expect him to study the knot, to attempt to unpick it with his fingers, to prove his cleverness as well as his strength. Alexander looks at the tangled mass of hardened bark. You see in his eyes not the patient curiosity of a puzzle solver, but the pragmatic assessment of a conqueror facing an obstacle. He understands that the prophecy is not a test of dexterity. It is a test of will. The world is not waiting for a man who can untie a knot. It is waiting for a man who can rule Asia. To waste time fiddling with loops and coils is to misunderstand the nature of the game. He does not reach for the knot. He reaches for his sword. With a single fluid motion, he draws the blade from its sheath. The polished iron flashes in the dim temple light. Before anyone can react, he swings. There is a sharp cracking sound, like a bone breaking. The knot, which has resisted the most cunning fingers for centuries, falls to the floor into clean, severed pieces. A shocked silence hangs in the air, followed by a collective gasp from his men. Alexander has not solved the riddle. He has destroyed it. He has not played by the rules. He has shattered them and rewritten them in a single act of brutal efficiency. He has declared that when a problem is too complex to be unraveled, it should be cut through. This moment is the polar opposite of Midas's entire existence. Midas lives with his tangled problem, managing it, concealing it, building an entire system of lies and symbols, the cap, the coins to contain it. He is a man trapped by complexity. Alexander is a man who refuses to be. His sword stroke is an argument against nuance, a declaration that some truths are not worth the time it takes to unravel them. It is the ultimate act of pragmatism, or perhaps the ultimate act of intellectual arrogance. He has fulfilled the letter of the prophecy without honoring its spirit, and yet he did fulfill it. He went on to conquer Asia. His violent shortcut worked. This historical solution forces you to confront a deeply unsettling idea. Midas, patient and suffering, remains a provincial king haunted by whispers. Alexander, impatient and brutal, becomes master of the known world. The quirky detail of the cornel bark is crucial here. Cornel wood was the preferred material for making javelins and spears, like the fearsome Macedonian sarissa. It was a material of war. The knot was not just a tangle of rope. It was a tangle of the very substance of weaponry, hardened into an intractable mass. Alexander, in a way, was simply applying the tool of war to a problem made of the material of war. He spoke to the knot in its own language. Midas, remember, tried to confess his secret to the earth, a gentle, passive act that backfired spectacularly. Alexander confesses nothing. He asserts his will with a blade. He does not ask for a solution, he imposes one. But the question that remained was, is cutting the knot an act of wisdom or a profound escape? In severing the problem, did Alexander prove his right to rule, or did he simply reveal an inability to tolerate a complexity he could not immediately master? And in your own life, when you face your own Gordian knot, is the sword truly the wisest tool, or is something essential lost when you choose to cut rather than to understand? Alexander's blade severs the past, leaving you to stand in the echoing silence of the temple, the two halves of the ancient not lying useless on the floor. His solution is a brutal testament to the appeal of simple answers. But as you turn your gaze back toward the heavens, toward the realm of the gods who set these tangled mortal dramas in motion, you realize that their world is anything but simple. Apollo, the very deity who cursed Midas with such elegant cruelty, is himself a figure of profound and disturbing complexity. You are no longer in the dusty temple. You are in the sun-drenched sanctuary of Delphi, Apollo's most sacred site. The air is clear and thin, and the cliffs of Mount Parnassus rise around you like jagged teeth. That's is the navel of the world, the place where the god speaks through his oracle, the Pythia. The mottos carved at the entrance to his temple preach moderation and self-knowledge, know thyself and nothing in excess. They are words of calm, rational wisdom, yet the stories told about this god, the keepsakes he is said to have collected, paint a picture not of calm reason, but of terrifying possessive pride. Consider the aftermath of his musical contest with Marsyas, the satyr who dared to believe his flute could rival Apollo's lyre. You saw what he did to Midas, a punishment of shame, a living joke. But Marsyas, a creature of the wild like Pan, received no such subtlety. After defeating him, Apollo did not just mock him. He decided to make of him a permanent lesson. You can almost hear the satyr's screams echoing off the Phrygian mountains as the god, with the chilling precision he applies to both music and vengeance, flayed him alive. The myth then adds a detail of grotesque sentimentality. Apollo, overcome with a sudden strange remorse, nailed the satyr's skin to a pine tree and transformed his blood into the river Marsyas. He kept the man's skin as a trophy, a wineskin of sorrow that would forever serve as a warning to any who might challenge his supremacy. And then there is the story of the Cumaean Sibyl, a priestess to whom Apollo offered a gift in exchange for her love. She asked for as many years of life as there were grains of sand in her hand. Apollo granted her wish. But when she then refused his advances, he let the gift stand. With one cruel omission, he had not granted her eternal youth. You can picture her, centuries later, shriveled and ancient, her body withered to the size of a cicada. Kept in a jar, her voice a dry, rasping whisper, endlessly repeating her desire to die. Apollo's gift became his revenge, a keepsake of his rejection, a living monument to his wounded pride. These are not the actions of a serene god of light and reason. They're the acts of a deity obsessed with his own perfection, one who collects trophies of his victories and reminders of his slights. His punishments are not just punitive. They are creative, theatrical, and deeply personal. He doesn't just defeat his rivals, he curates them. He turns them into artifacts, a skin, a shriveled prophetess, a king with the ears of an ass. They become part of his vast unseen collection of cautionary tales. This divine hoarding of strange, painful keepsakes brings to mind a very human practice from the ancient world, the creation of apotropaic objects. These were charms, amulets, or grotesque faces like the Gorgon's head used to ward off evil. People believed that by displaying something ugly or frightening, they could frighten away malevolent spirits. Apollo's trophies function as a kind of divine apotropaic magic. He displays the horrifying results of challenging him to ward off any future challenges. The skin of Marsyas, the ears of Midas, they are not just punishments. They are grotesque charms meant to protect his own ego. Apollo's shine is complicated. He is the god of the lyre, but his sacred animal is the wolf. He is the god of healing, but his arrows can bring plague. He is the god of prophecy, who demands you know thyself, yet he is a master of riddles and ambiguous pronouncements that can lead a king to ruin. He embodies the perfect, terrifying balance of creation and destruction. His music can bring order to the cosmos, and his anger can turn a living being into a permanent exhibit in his museum of grievances. Remember the lyre itself. It is his most famous attribute, an instrument of transcendent beauty. But its origin is bizarre. The infant Hermes, a trickster god from birth, stole Apollo's sacred cattle on the day he was born. To appease his furious older brother, the clever baby invented the lyre from a tortoise shell and offered it to him as a gift. Apollo was so enchanted by the instrument that he forgave the theft. This means that the very symbol of Apollo's divine art, the source of his perfect music, was born from an act of theft and bribery. It is a product of chaos, not order. The harmony he creates is played on an instrument born from its opposite. Midas made the mistake of judging Apollo's art based on emotion, on heart. He failed to understand that, for Apollo, art is not about emotion. It is about supremacy. It is a demonstration of an unassailable, divine order. To prefer Pan's messy, vital tune was not just an aesthetic error, it was a philosophical one. It was to choose the chaos of life over the cold perfection of the godhead. And Apollo, the eternal curator of his own flawless reputation, could not let that stand. He needed a new piece for his collection, and Midas, with his foolishly honest opinion, was the perfect specimen. The god of light is also a god of shadows. His justice is not blind, it is chillingly observant, and it has a long, long memory. But the question that remained was, if the god of order and reason is himself a collector of such cruel and unusual punishments, what does that say about the very nature of divine justice? Is it about balance and fairness, or is it simply about the powerful immortalizing their own victories in the most creative and terrifying ways they can imagine? Apollo's cruelty is a chilling, precise art form. It is the cold fire of wounded pride, the surgeon's scalpel of divine retribution. But as you turn your attention away from the sun-drenched peaks of Delphi and back toward the shadowed, vine-tangled groves where Midas's troubles began, you encounter a different kind of divine power. It is no less dangerous, but its nature is entirely distinct. It is the power of Dionysus, the god who gave Midas the golden touch, and his kindness is often more perilous than Apollo's wrath. You are in a forest at dusk. The light is failing, and the shadows are growing long and deep. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, night-blooming jasmine, and the faint, sweet smell of fermenting fruit. You hear a sound in the distance, a sound that begins as a low hum and slowly builds. The rhythmic beat of a hand drum, the high skirling notes of a pipe, and a chorus of voices rising in a chant that is both joyful and feral. This is the sound of Dionysus and his followers, the Maenads and Satyrs, on the move. Dionysus is the god of the vine, of wine, of ecstasy. His domain is the breaking of boundaries. He is the god of the other, the force that dissolves the rigid structures of society, of family, of the self. Apollo demands that you know thyself. Dionysus invites you to lose thyself. He offers liberation, a release from the burdens of reason and responsibility. His gift is a sacred madness, a return to a primal, instinctual state. Remember how he granted Midas's wish for the golden touch? There was no anger, no malice. There was a gentle warning, a sad smile, and then a simple fulfillment of the king's request. Dionysus did not punish Midas for his greed. He gave him exactly what he wanted and allowed the wish itself to become the teacher. His method is not retribution, but revelation. He lets mortals walk into the prisons of their own making, confident that the experience itself will be the only lesson they need. When Midas returned, broken and starving, Dionysus did not demand an apology or a sacrifice. He simply felt pity and provided the cure. His kindness seems genuine, his mercy absolute. But this kindness has a razor's edge. Dionysus's gifts are not free. They demand respect, and more importantly, they demand recognition of his power. To deny Dionysus, to resist the ecstatic release he offers, is to invite a catastrophe far more terrifying than Apollo's personal vendettas. Consider the fate of Pentheus, the young king of Thebes. He was a man of law and order, a ruler who valued discipline and control. When the cult of Dionysus arrived in his city with its wild all-night dancing and its rumors of women abandoning their homes to roam the mountains, in a frenzy, he saw it as a threat to his authority and to the moral fabric of his kingdom. He refused to acknowledge Dionysus as a god. He saw him as a charlatan, a foreign troublemaker, and had him arrested. Dionysus, disguised as one of his own priests, allowed himself to be captured. His vengeance, when it came, was a masterwork of psychological horror. He did not strike Pentheus down. Instead, he preyed on his repressed curiosity. He stoked the king's secret desire to see the very rites he had forbidden. He convinced Pentheus to dress as a woman, as a Maenad, in order to spy on them undetected. Then he led the disguised king up into the mountains and delivered him into the hands of the very women he had scorned, including his own mother, Agave. You are on the slopes of Mount Cithaeron. The Maenads are in a state of divine madness, their senses altered by the god. They do not see Pentheus, the king, their kinsman. Under Dionysus's spell, they see a wild animal, a mountain lion, trespassing in their sacred space. With the savage, collective strength granted to them by the god, they fall upon him. His own mother is the first to strike, tearing him limb from limb in a fit of ecstatic violence. She returns to Thebes in triumph, carrying his head on her thyrsus, believing it to be the head of the beast she has hunted. Only when the madness recedes does she realize she is holding the severed head of her own son. This is the other face of Dionysus's dangerous kindness. He does not punish you for who you are. He makes you who you are, amplified to the point of self-destruction. He turned Pentheus's rigid control into a fatal curiosity, and his mother's devotion into a murderous frenzy. He is a god of systems, not individuals. Apollo curses the man. Dionysus unleashes the mob. A strange, almost comical detail in the mythology of Dionysus is his association with the dolphin. Remember the pirates he transformed? In some art, he is depicted riding a dolphin, an animal of intelligence and playfulness.
Right.
Yet this is the same God who can inspire a mother to tear her son to pieces. He contains both the joyful leap of the dolphin and the savage fury of the bacchanal. His kindness is the calm surface of the sea that conceals the crushing pressure of the depths. He will forgive your greed, as he forgave Midas, but he will not forgive your denial of his essential nature. Midas was lucky. He offended Dionysus only with his naivete, a flaw the god could easily pity and correct. He chose the wrong gift, but he never denied the giver. But when he stood on Mount Temlus and judged the musical contest, he placed himself in the domain of Apollo, a god whose ego is as vast and unforgiving as the sky. Midas survived Dionysus's lesson in limitations, only to stumble into Apollo's masterclass in humiliation. He escaped the god of chaos, only to be ensnared by the god of order. But the question that remained was, which is the more terrifying deity? The one who punishes you with meticulous personal cruelty for a perceived slight, or the one whose gentle, forgiving nature can? If you fail to respect its power, unleash a force that will have your own mother tear you apart. You are seated on the throne of Phrygia, but you are not in a position of power. You are in a crucible of shame. The cool, heavy weight of the crown on your head is a phantom sensation. The true pressure comes from the soft, warm wool of the Phrygian cap beneath it, a constant, itching reminder of the secret it conceals. Your world has been remade by Apollo's curse. You are a king, yet you are a prisoner.
Oh yeah, you're
Surrounded by your court, yet you are utterly alone. Your hearing, once a simple human sense, has become both a divine gift and an instrument of torture. Your long, grotesque ears, twitching in their dark prison, pick up every sound with excruciating clarity: the scuff of a leather shoe, the rustle of a silk robe, a courtier clearing his throat across the hall. And in every sound, you hear the potential for the one you dread most: laughter. This is the psychology of your secrecy, an anatomy of royal shame. You have become a living embodiment of the spotlight effect, that deeply human, deeply flawed conviction that everyone is watching you, that every tiny imperfection is magnified and scrutinized under a relentless public gaze. For a normal person, this is a fleeting social anxiety. For a king, it is a permanent condition of existence. The spotlight is always on. But where it once illuminated your crown, your authority, your wealth, you now feel it focused with burning intensity on the cloth that covers your ears. You feel as though every eye in the room is trying to see through the wool, to confirm the whisper they heard on the wind. The burden is not the secret itself, but the ceaseless, exhausting effort of its concealment. Your mind is a fortress under perpetual siege. Part of your consciousness is always dedicated to the performance. Keep your head still. Avoid sudden movements. Do not let the cap slip. Not let your hand stray to your head to adjust it. This constant vigilance is a tax on your soul, draining your energy, hollowing you out from the inside. The king who once laughed with abandon at his golden touch, who once spoke his mind with foolish honesty on a sacred mountain, is gone. In his place is a carefully constructed automaton of royal decorum, a man whose every gesture is policed by his own paranoia. And you have come to understand a terrible truth, a truth that no political advisor will ever tell you. A leader can survive defeat, but he cannot survive ridicule. A king can lose a war, and his people might still honor him as a tragic hero. Bards might sing of his valiant, doomed struggle. His name could be etched in history with a kind of noble sadness. But a king who becomes a joke? A king whose defining characteristic is a pair of donkey's ears? Laughter is an acid that dissolves majesty. It does not argue with power, it simply punctures it, lets the air out, and reveals the ordinary flawed human being beneath the robes and the crown. An assassin's dagger kills the man, but a shared snicker kills the king. Apollo knew this. His punishment was not designed to kill you, but to dismantle the entire edifice of your authority, whisper by whisper, laugh by laugh. This brings to mind a powerful historical ritual from an empire yet to come, the Roman triumph. When a victorious general paraded through the streets of Rome, lauded as a near deity by the cheering crowds, a slave would stand behind him in the chariot, holding a laurel crown over his head. And this slave had one duty, to whisper repeatedly into the general's ear, "Memento mori," remember you will die. It was a formalized, controlled dose of humility, a ritualized whisper designed to keep a man's pride in check. You, Midas, have no such controlled ritual. Your whisper is the chaotic, mocking voice of the reeds. It is not designed to keep you humble, but to make you absurd. Rome understood that supreme power needed a tether to reality. You've been given a tether to ridicule. And who is the god of this ridicule? Not Apollo, the executioner, but a lesser-known, far more irritating deity, Momus, the personification of blame and criticism. Bizarre figure in the Greek pantheon, Momus was the ultimate divine heckler, who found fault in everything. He criticized Hephaestus's creation of man because he had Dan T put a window in his chest to see his true thoughts. He complained that a bull's horn should have been on its forehead for better goring. His most famous critique was of Aphrodite herself. Unable to find a flaw in her perfect form, he complained that her sandals squeaked. He was the god of the petty complaint, the nitpicker, the voice that finds the one absurd detail and obsesses over it. He was eventually exiled from Olympus for being an intolerable cosmic annoyance. Apollo did not need to stay and mock you. He simply unleashed the spirit of Mamos upon your kingdom, turning every subject into a potential critic, every breeze into a heckler. You look out at your court, at the sea of Phrygian caps, your desperate gambit, but you know it is not enough. You can command what they wear, but you cannot command what they think. The roaring lion on your new coins feels like a hollow boast. True power, you now realize, is not stamped on metal. It is a fragile consensus, a shared story. And a new story is being told about you. A better, funnier story. But the question that remained was this: what is the true foundation of authority? Is it the power to command armies and mint coins? Or is it the simple, fragile, and easily shattered belief that the one in charge is not, in the end, completely and utterly absurd? The king's authority is eroding, not from a rebellion of swords, but from a rebellion of whispers. He is learning a fundamental lesson of the ancient mysteries. Some of the most powerful forces in the cosmos are not meant to be seen, but to be heard. You are standing with him in this new reality. A world where destiny arrives not as a charging army, but as a subtle shift in the acoustic landscape. Your ears, like his, become the true oracle, the organs through which fate announces its arrival. Think of Orpheus, the greatest of all mortal musicians. His song was a force of nature. He did not command the world with a scepter, but with a voice and a lyre. When his wife Eurydice was lost to the underworld, he did not fight his way in. He sang his way in. His melody was so heartbreakingly beautiful that it halted the torments of the damned. The eternally rolling stone of Sisyphus paused on its hill. The ever-turning wheel of Ixion stood still. The Danaids forgot to fill their leaking jars. His music persuaded Hades and Persephone, the grim rulers of the dead, to do the unthinkable, to release a soul. They agreed, but on one condition, a condition based entirely on sound and its absence. He could lead Eurydice out, but he must not look back at her until they were both fully in the light of the living world. The entire journey was a test of faith conducted in near silence, broken only by the sound of his own footsteps and the faint ghostly shuffle of hers behind him. You are walking that path with him now, up from the darkness. The air is cold and smells of damp stone and forgotten things. Every nerve is strained, listening for the sound of her presence. Is she there? Is that her footstep, or just the echo of his own? His doubt grows with every step, a silent scream in his mind. The temptation to turn, to confirm with his eyes what his ears can no longer trust, becomes unbearable. He is almost at the threshold. Sunlight streams down from the entrance ahead, and in that final moment, his faith breaks. He turns. He sees her, a pale, lovely shadow, her hand outstretched. But the rule was absolute. The moment his gaze falls upon her, she is pulled back, dissolving like smoke. A faint, sorrowful sigh, the only sound of her departure. Orpheus's fate was sealed not by what he saw, but by his failure to trust what he could or could not hear. His epic love story became a tragedy of acoustics. Now shift your senses from the myths of Greece to the starker legends of the Norse. You are standing on the plains of Vigrid, the site of the final world-ending battle, Ragnarok. The sky is dark. The air crackles with doom, and then you hear it. A single, clear, impossibly loud note, a sound that seems to shake the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil itself. It is the call of the Jallarhorn. The Jallarhorn is the yelling horn of the god Heimdall, the ever-vigilant watchman of Asgard. His hearing is so acute he can hear grass growing on the earth and wool growing on sheep. For centuries he has stood guard, waiting for the first signs of the apocalypse. When the armies of giants and monsters begin their march, he will raise the Jallarhorn to his lips and sound the alarm, a blast that will be heard in all 9 realms. It is the sound that says, "The end is here." It does not report on the battle, it begins it. The sound itself is the trigger, the declaration that the final chapter of the gods has begun, like the whispering reeds that broadcast Midas's shame. The Jallarhorn is a medium for an inescapable truth, but on a cosmic, world-shattering scale. These ancient mysteries all converge on a single, powerful idea. Sound is fate. A whispered secret can unravel a kingdom. A broken silence can lose a soul. A horn blast can end a world. Midas is trapped in this sonic web of destiny. Apollo, the god of the lyre, has weaponized sound against him, has turned the king's own environment into a constant, low-frequency broadcast of his failure. This idea is mirrored in a strange piece of real-world physics, the concept of resonance. Every object has a natural frequency, a pitch at which it will vibrate if struck. If you can produce a sound at that exact frequency, you can cause the object to vibrate with increasing amplitude, even to the point of shattering. A trained singer, it is said, can shatter a wine glass by finding its resonant frequency and holding the note. The whispering reeds have found the resonant frequency of Midas's shame. Every gust of wind is a sustained note, causing the fragile structure of his authority to vibrate, to crack, to threaten, to shatter completely. He is a king being unmade by a sound wave, and what of the bizarre twitching tools of his torment? Donkeys and asses, in the ancient world, were not just symbols of stubbornness or foolishness. They were also known for their extraordinary hearing. Their large, mobile ears could pivot like radar dishes, catching faint sounds from miles away. They were survival tools, designed to detect the approach of a predator long before it could be seen. Apollo's curse was, as always, deeply ironic. He gave Midas the ears of an animal known for its incredible ability to hear danger, but made him the source of the very danger he was now perfectly equipped to detect. His ears are not just a mark of shame. They are a finely tuned receiving apparatus for the broadcast of his own ridicule. You are with him in the dead of night. The palace is silent. He cannot sleep. He sits by a window, the Phrygian cap, a familiar weight on his head, and he listens. He listens to the sound of his own kingdom turning against him, not in a roar of rebellion, but in the soft, insidious sigh of the wind through the reeds by the river. But the question that remained was, if your destiny is a sound, can you change your fate by changing the song? Or are you doomed to simply listen as the world sings the story of your downfall? The song of his downfall plays on the wind, a ceaseless, maddening tune. But the curse that began it all, the Midas touch, has not vanished from the world. It has merely changed its form. It has seeped from the king's hands into the river, and from the river into the very soil of his kingdom. You can trace its journey, a golden poison that promises prosperity while it hollows out a nation's heart. You are standing again by the banks of the Pactolus River. The sun is low, and the light catches the sediment at the water's edge, making it glitter and gleam. This is the source of Lydia's and Phrygia's immense wealth, the legendary deposit of electrum that funded empires. It is the washed-away sin of Midas, now dredged from the riverbed and stamped with the roaring lion of his authority. The kingdom is quite literally running on the residue of a divine curse. This is the birth of the resource curse, an economic and political malady that has plagued nations throughout human history, right up to the modern day. You see it in countries blessed with vast reserves of oil, or diamonds, or gold. The sudden influx of immense, unearned wealth seems like a gift from the gods, a shortcut to prosperity. But so often, it becomes a poison. It stifles innovation. Why develop other industries when you can simply pull riches from the ground? It breeds corruption as elites fight to control the source of the wealth. It destabilizes politics, leading to autocracy and rebellion. It hollows out the society, creating a glittering facade that conceals a rotten core. Phrygia is the mythical blueprint for this phenomenon. Midas did not have to build a complex economy based on agriculture, trade, and craft, the very things his people were known for. He prayed for a shortcut. He wanted wealth without effort. Dionysus granted his wish, and the result was starvation. Then he washed that curse into the river, and the kingdom at large inherited a diluted, slower-acting version of the same affliction. The easy gold from the Pactolus makes the kingdom rich, but it also makes it a target. It fosters a culture of acquisition rather than creation. The Lydian kings, who ruled after Midas, became legendary not for their wisdom or justice, but for their staggering, almost mythical wealth. King Croesus became a byword for riches, a man so confident in his gold that he misinterpreted a prophecy from Apollo's oracle and led his kingdom to ruin at the hands of the Persians. The gold curse, it seems, just keeps cursing. You can see the effects in the marketplace. The roaring lion on the coin demands trust, but it is a cold, impersonal trust in the state, not the warm, messy trust between people. A baker who once took pride in the quality of his bread now cares more about the quantity of coins he can accumulate. A weaver who once poured her soul into a complex tapestry now calculates the fastest way to produce simple cloth for a quick sale. The intrinsic value of work, of skill, of community is slowly being eroded, replaced by the single universal metric of the coin. The golden touch no longer turns things to metal instantly. It does so slowly, over generations, leaching the life and spirit out of the culture until only the economic value remains. The kingdom has not turned to gold, but it has begun to think in gold. This concept finds a strange echo in the alchemical pursuits of a later age. Alchemists spent centuries trying to discover the philosopher's stone, a substance that could transmute base metals into gold. This was the Midas touch, sought after as the ultimate prize. But the true alchemists, the ones who understood the spiritual dimension of the great work, knew that the real goal was not the creation of literal gold, but the transmutation of the self-turning the leaden soul of an ordinary human into the golden soul of an enlightened being. Midas's story is the perfect inverse of this ideal. He achieves the physical transmutation without the spiritual one, and the result is a curse. His kingdom, in turn, focuses on the accumulation of physical gold, and its soul begins to turn to lead. A bizarre artifact of the ancient world underscores this tension: the golden death mask of Agamemnon, discovered by Heinrich Schliemann at Mycenae. For Schliemann, it was proof of the epic heroes, a direct link to a world of unimaginable wealth and power. It was a face from the age of heroes, preserved in the most precious of metals. It is a stunning, powerful object, but it is also the face of a dead man. It is a portrait of power that has passed, a treasure that could not save its owner from betrayal and murder. Like the golden statue of Midas's daughter, it is a monument of sterile, lifeless wealth, a treasure that testifies to the ultimate powerlessness of gold in the face of human fate. Midas, haunted by the whispers of his second curse, is now presiding over the slow, systemic effects of his first. He sees the greed in his courtiers' eyes, the way they value the stamped lion more than their own honor. He tried to control the narrative by creating the coins, but the coins have created their own narrative, one in which everything and everyone has a price. He is the king of a nation that is slowly, almost imperceptibly, turning to stone from the inside out. The banquet of ashen gold is no longer a private horror. It has become a public policy. But the question that remained was, when a kingdom's soul is being poisoned by the very wealth that is supposed to be its strength, can it ever be saved? Or is it doomed to become a beautiful, glittering, but ultimately empty shell, a historical artifact waiting to be conquered and plundered? The coins in your treasury and the whispers on the wind are stories intangible and pervasive. But stories like people must eventually return to the earth. Now, you must travel forward in time, leaving the age of myth behind to stand on the same Phrygian plain under a different, more modern sun. The year is 1957. Before you rises a great silent hill, a feature so large and symmetrical it seems less a part of the natural landscape and more like a scar left by a forgotten giant. It is a man-made mountain of clay and stone, the great tumulus of Gordian, the largest of its kind in Anatolia. For over 2.5 millennia, it has kept its secret, a sleeping king locked in a chamber of silent wood. You are with the team of archaeologists from the University of Pennsylvania Museum. The air is dry and smells of dust and wild thyme. For months, they have probed the mound, drilling into its heart, searching for the void that would signify a hidden chamber, and they have found it. A drill bit suddenly drops, plunging into empty space deep within the colossal heap of earth. A wave of electric anticipation ripples through the crew. They sink a shaft down toward the anomaly, and as they clear the final barrier, you are there with them, peering into the darkness. You are the first to breathe this air in nearly 2,700 years. The scent that rushes out is not one of decay, but the sharp aromatic perfume of ancient wood juniper, cedar, and pine, preserved by the immense, steady pressure of the earth above. As lights are lowered into the chamber, a scene of impossible preservation emerges from the gloom. You have entered the world of a dead king. This is not a world of glittering, supernatural gold. It is a world of bronze, wood, and cloth, a reality far richer and more poignant than the legend. The chamber itself is a marvel, a log cabin of immense, perfectly fitted timbers, a masterpiece of Phrygian woodworking. And it is crowded. Against one wall you see the largest collection of Iron Age drinking vessels ever found. Hundreds of bronze bowls, ladles, and great cauldrons, some large enough to hold over 150 liters. This was the setting for a funerary feast, a final party for the king's journey into the afterlife. Chemical analysis of the residue inside these vessels will later reveal the menu: a spicy stew of lamb or goat and lentils, washed down with a mixed fermented beverage, a kind of potent beer-wine-meat hybrid. You look at this evidence of a real feast, a meal of flavor and substance meant to sustain a soul on its final journey, and you remember the tragic banquet of Midas where every morsel turned to cold, inedible metal. The myth speaks of a wealth that denies sustenance. The reality preserved in this tomb speaks of a wealth that provides it, even in death. Your eyes are drawn to the furniture. There are intricately inlaid wooden screens or serving stands, their surfaces a complex mosaic of geometric patterns. This is the celebrated craft of the Phrygian artisans, testament to a deep understanding of living materials, of patient human skill. It is the polar opposite of the Midas touch, which was an act of crude, instantaneous, and life-destroying alchemy. And then you see him. In the corner of the tomb lies a simple log coffin. Inside rests the skeleton of a man, small in stature, who lived to be around 60 years old, great age for the time. He was buried, surrounded by the tools of his life and his final celebration. Dendrochronology, the science of dating by tree rings, will analyze the timbers of this tomb and place its construction around 740 BCE, date that aligns perfectly with the reign of the historical King Midas, who is mentioned in Assyrian records. This is him. This is the man behind the myth. So the tomb whispers the truth. He was a king of immense power and wealth? Yes. But his wealth was measured in bronze cauldrons, skilled craftsmanship, and the sheer manpower required to build this mountain over his body. There is no gold, no golden daughter, no golden furniture. The legend, it seems, is a fever dream, a story that took the king's very real, very impressive power and amplified it into the realm of the supernatural, forgetting the man and remembering only an exaggerated caricature of his riches. As you stand in the silent chamber, you think of the god who would have guided this king's soul. It's not Apollo, not Dionysus, but Hermes, in his role as psychopompos, the guide of souls. It is his duty to lead the dead to the underworld. His symbol is the caduceus, that strange staff entwined with two serpents. This is one of the most bizarre and misunderstood divine artifacts. It is often confused with the rod of Asclepius, a single snake on a staff, the symbol of medicine. But the caduceus, with its two opposing snakes, is a symbol of balance, of commerce, of negotiation, and of peaceful passage through hostile territory. It is the passport of the dead. Hermes would have carried this staff not to lead the mythical Midas to a golden hell, but to guide this small, elderly man, this real king, on the same mundane, shadowy path to Hades that all mortals must walk. The tomb's contents were the luggage for that ordinary final trip. But the question that remained was, which story tells you more about the nature of power? The fantastical legend of the Golden Touch, a tale of divine favor and ruin that lives forever in the imagination? Or the quiet, profound evidence of this tomb, the residue of a real meal the king could eat? The beautiful wooden tables he could use, and the bronze bowls from which his friends and family could drink a final toast to his very human, very mortal life. The tomb offers the hard truth of a man, the quiet reality of bronze and bone. But the myth refuses to stay buried with him. While the historical Midas rests in his wooden chamber, the story of his shame, his ridiculous accursed ears, slips free from the soil of Phrygia and begins a strange journey across lands and centuries. You discover that Midas is not alone. He is merely the most famous member of a secret unhappy club of kings, afflicted with the same bizarre malady. His story is not an isolated incident. It is an archetype, a pattern that reappears in the mists of Ireland, the valleys of Wales, and the folklore of distant Asia. Travel now, from the sun-baked plains of Anatolia to the damp green hills of ancient Ireland. The air here is soft and smells of rain and peat smoke. You are at the court of Lobraid Loenzek, legendary High King of Ireland whose name means the exile speaks. He is a just and powerful ruler, but he harbors a terrible secret, one he protects with lethal force. He has the ears of a horse. The parallel is so precise, it sends a shiver down your spine. Just like Midas, Lobraid lives in mortal fear of exposure. And just like Midas, his secret is known only to his barbers. But Lobraid's method of concealment is far more brutal. Each year a new barber is chosen by lot to trim the king's hair. And each year after the job is done and the secret has been seen, the barber is put to death. The king's shame is watered with the blood of innocent men. One year, the lot falls to a young man who is the only son of a widowed mother. She pleads with the king for her son's life, and Lobraid, moved by her grief, relents. He spares the barber, but only after extracting a solemn oath of absolute silence on pain of death. And so the curse finds its new host. The secret, which had been briefly held and then extinguished with each barber's life, now has a permanent vessel. The young man, like Midas's barber, is consumed by the burden. The knowledge festers inside him, a sickness that makes his hair fall out and his body waste away. On the verge of death, he consults a druid, a priest of the old ways, who understands the deep magic of the land. The druid sees that the secret is a poison and must be drawn out. His advice is chillingly familiar. He tells the boy to go to a place where 4 roads meet, to turn to his right, and to whisper his secret to the first tree he sees. The barber does as he is told. He finds a great graceful willow, presses his lips to its bark, confesses. Ta dush cloué chapelle, à Lobraid Loenzek. Lobraid Loenzek has 2 horses' ears. The relief is instantaneous. The sickness leaves him, and the burden is lifted. He is confided in the silent, listening earth. But just as in Phrygia, the earth does not keep secrets. Sometime later, the chief musician of the kingdom, a bard named Phrygia, breaks his harp. He needs fine wood for a new one, and his eyes fall upon the beautiful, vibrant willow tree that has absorbed the barber's secret. He cuts it down, and from its wood he fashions a magnificent new instrument. That evening, there's a great feast in the king's hall. Phrygia is called upon to play. He raises the new harp, its polished wood gleaming in the torchlight, and he strikes the strings. But the harp does not play the tune he intends. Instead, from its wooden heart, a clear, singing voice emerges, broadcasting the secret it was born from to the entire court ta dh cloe chapelle arla braid, loingsec. The secret is out. The harp made from the confession tree has become the voice of the truth. This idea of a musical instrument with a will of its own is a recurring and bizarre detail in Celtic myth. The Dagda, a great father god of the Irish pantheon, owned a magical harp called Uathan. It was not merely an instrument, it was a sentient being. It could play 3 magical strains that controlled the emotions of all who heard them. The strain of sorrow that made armies weep, the strain of joy that made them laugh, and the strain of sleep that could put them into a deep slumber. The harp would also come when the Dagda called it. The idea that a harp could have a voice and a purpose of its own was woven into the very fabric of their mythology. Creftine's harp was not just a cursed object. It was following a divine precedent. Its pattern echoes again in Wales, with the story of King March ap Myrcian, who also had horse's ears. And it appears in different forms across the world, a recurring motif suggesting a universal truth. These stories are a code. The animal ears are not just a random, bizarre deformity. They're a political allegory, a physical manifestation of a ruler's greatest flaw. He does not listen. A king with the ears of a donkey is stubborn, foolish, deaf to wise counsel. A king with the ears of a horse is wild, separate from his people, unable to hear their needs. Midas's punishment from Apollo was not random, it was deeply symbolic. He was cursed for his failure of artistic and divine hearing, and the curse was a literal representation of his inner deafness. But the question that remained was, are these parallel myths just a coincidence, a strange quirk of the collective unconscious? Or are they a form of ancient coded dissent, a safe way for powerless storytellers to criticize their deaf and stubborn rulers by embedding their critiques in a fairy tale so strange, so memorable, that it could never be silenced? The coded message of the animal ears travels through time, a story that insists on being told. But now, let's return to the source, to the riverbank, where the barber's whisper first met the earth. Let's listen not with the ears of a mythologist, but with the ears of a modern scientist. The whispering reeds are not just a poetic fancy. They are a gateway to understanding the profound, an often strange relationship between sound, psychology, and the very air we breathe. You are standing by the clump of reeds again. Light breezes blowing, and you hear the sound. Midas has ass's ears. Sounds like a miracle, a supernatural broadcast. But what if it's a phenomenon we can almost explain? You are entering the world of psychoacoustics, the study of how humans perceive sound. Our brains are not passive recording devices. They are active, pattern-seeking machines, desperate to find meaning in a chaotic world of sensory input. This is why we see faces in clouds or hear voices in the static of an untuned radio. This phenomenon is called pareidolia. The wind blowing through the reeds creates a complex sound, a white noise composed of countless different frequencies. But the barber's story, the rumor, has already primed the brains of everyone in the kingdom. They are not just hearing the wind, they're listening for the secret. Their brains, already holding the pattern of the words, seize upon the random rustling sounds and organize them into the very phrase they expect to hear. The reeds do not need to speak. The listeners' minds do the work for them, creating meaning out of chaos. The curse is no longer in the reeds themselves, it is in the collective consciousness of the people who listen to them. Now, consider the nature of the sound itself, a whisper. A shout demands attention, but a whisper invites it. Shout is a command. A whisper is a conspiracy. You have to lean in, to focus, to become a participant in the act of communication. This is the secret behind the modern phenomenon of ASMR, or autonomous sensory meridian response. Millions of people listen to videos of soft whispering voices, the crinkling of paper, or the gentle tapping of fingernails, experiencing a pleasant, tingling sensation and a feeling of deep relaxation and intimacy. The whispering reeds are the world's first ASMR broadcast. The sound is quiet, sibilant, and personal. It doesn't feel like a public proclamation. It feels like a secret being shared directly with you. This intimacy makes the message far more powerful and believable than a royal decree shouted from the palace walls. The king's coins, with their roaring lions, are a form of shouting. They are a loud public declaration of authority. But the reeds have co-opted a deeper, more primal form of communication. They have weaponized the intimate power of the whisper, and it is a power that the king's roar cannot defeat. The very mechanism of the curse is rooted in the biology of the reeds themselves. Phragmites, the common river reed, is a hollow tube. When wind blows over its open end, it acts like a tiny flute or a pondpipe, the very instrument that started Midas's second ordeal. Each reed, depending on its length and diameter, will resonate at a specific frequency. A thicket of thousands of reeds, all of different sizes, will produce a vast and complex chord when the wind blows. It is a natural orchestra, playing a constant, shifting symphony. The barber's secret did not need to be magical. It just needed to find its way into a system that was already perfectly designed to turn breath into music. And here we find a bizarre mythological link. The syrinx, the Greek name for the panpipes, has its own story. The god Pan fell in love with a nymph named Syrinx. To escape him, she fled to a river and begged the river nymphs for help. They transformed her into a clump of reeds. The frustrated Pan, hearing the wind whistle mournfully through the reeds that had once been his love, cut them down and fashioned them into his pipes, so that he could at least hold her and breathe through her. The instrument of Pan is born from a story of unwanted pursuit and a desperate desire for silence. It is an instrument born from a voice that was forcibly silenced and then given a new, artificial one. Midas, who was cursed for preferring the sound of Pan's pipes, is now haunted by an entire orchestra of them. An army of tiny flutes made from the reeds that lined his river, all playing the same mocking tune. The instrument he defended has become the instrument of his torment. The curse has become a self-perpetuating psychoacoustic loop. The story primes the brain. The brain interprets the random noise of the reeds as the story, which reinforces the story, which then primes more brains. It is a perfect viral information system, an ancient engine of narrative contagion. But the question that remained was, if you are a king and your enemy is not an army, but a sound that has infected the minds of your people, how do you fight it? Can you burn the reeds? Can you dam the river? Or have you already lost, because the true battle is not on the riverbank, but in the collective imagination of the kingdom, a territory where you have no authority at all? The silence in the throne room is a physical presence. It is not the silence of fear, but of recalibration. The entire social and political reality of the court is being reordered in real time around the stark, undeniable fact of the king's ears. You watch as a single courtier, then another, then a dozen, slowly, awkwardly reach up and remove their own Phrygian caps. It is not a gesture of mockery, but of solidarity, of empathy. They are laying down their masks because their king has laid down his. The era of enforced concealment is over. The court of honest silence, born in that moment, has given way to a court of shared, vulnerable truth. And the curse, the true curse of shame, breaks. Because it was never about the ears, it was about the hiding. In the weeks that follow, a strange peace settles over the kingdom. The reeds by the river still whisper when the wind blows, but the sound has lost its sting. The words Midas's ass's ears are no longer a taunt. They are simply a fact, an old story that has lost its power to wound. The joke is no longer funny now that the victim has refused to be the butt of it. The myths do not agree on what happened next, but as you stand in the quiet aftermath, a new story feels true. One morning, Midas wakes, and the familiar hated weight and shape are gone. He reaches up to find not the long hairy ears of a donkey, but his own simple, human ears, restored. Apollo, the god of know thyself, has lifted the curse, not out of pity, but because it was no longer necessary. Midas had finally learned his lesson. He had looked upon his own flawed self, accepted it, and shown it to the world. He had, at long last, come to know himself. The punishment, its purpose served, simply dissolves. Midas lives out the rest of his days as a wiser, humbler king, a man who understands the difference between the glitter of gold and the warmth, of the sun between the roar of authority and the quiet power of an accepted truth. His story, however, is just beginning its own journey. Now, travel forward again, 7 centuries from the king's final quiet reign. You are in Rome, in a study filled with scrolls and the scent of ink and papyrus. A poet is at work, his brow furrowed in concentration. His name is Ovid. He is a master storyteller, living under the watchful eye of the Emperor Augustus. Ovid is a collector of tales, a connoisseur of transformations. He is gathering the old wild myths of the Greeks and reshaping them, polishing their rough folkloric edges into the smooth, elegant hexameters of Latin poetry for a sophisticated Roman audience. And he has come across the strange, contradictory stories of a foolish Phrygian king. In Ovid's hands, the story of Midas is chiseled into the form that will be passed down through empires. He separates the two curses, making them distinct episodes. The tale of the golden touch becomes a sharp, concise fable about the folly of greed. The story of the donkey's ears becomes a lesson in the dangers of offending the gods. Ovid's version is brilliant, witty, and psychologically astute. But it is also a product of its time. He writes for an empire that values order and clear moral lessons. The raw, messy, interconnected truths of Midas's life, the slow poisoning of his kingdom by the resource curse, the political desperation behind the Phrygian cap, the psychoacoustic power of the whispering reeds are softened, simplified, made to fit a more digestible narrative structure. Ovid's Metamorphoses becomes a bestseller of the ancient world, a foundational text of Western culture. And through his telling, the name of Midas travels through the centuries. But a strange thing happens along the way. The meaning begins to drift. The horror of the golden touch, the starvation, the petrified daughter, the living death begins to fade. The modern world forgets the curse and remembers only the touch. To have the Midas touch today means not that you will starve in a room full of gold, but that everything you are involved with turns to profit.
House.
It is a phrase of ultimate praise for a businessman or investor.
House.
The story of a terrible divine punishment has been transformed into a slogan for capitalist success. And here lies a final, bizarre irony that coils back on the storyteller himself. Ovid, the man who so brilliantly recorded the tale of a king's secret and the punishment for speaking out of turn, was himself exiled by his own emperor. For reasons that remain a mystery, Augustus banished him to the bleak, remote port of Tomis on the Black Sea, a place not so far from Midas's own Phrygia. Ovid himself claimed his downfall was due to a poem and a mistake. He, the master of stories, became trapped in a story he could not control, punished for something he saw or said, silenced by a power that would brook no dissent. The poet who wrote of Apollo's wrath felt the full weight of an emperor's displeasure. So the story of Midas comes down to you, filtered through Ovid's genius and his own tragic fate, and then warped again by the passage of time. You have now heard the whispers behind the legend, the grieving father, the paranoid king, the man who found freedom only when he embraced his own absurdity. But the question that remained was, which version of the story holds the real power? Does the polished fable we have inherited serve as a genuine warning, a story that heals our culture by reminding us of the dangers of greed and hubris? Or does its modern twisted meaning, the celebration of the Midas touch, haunt us? A ghost of a forgotten truth, encouraging the very behavior the myth was meant to condemn. And so the story returns to you. It has traveled through the hands of a king, the mind of a barber, the roots of a reed, the pen of a poet, and the distorting lens of centuries. It now rests here, in the quiet space of your own listening. You are the final vessel. You stand one last time on the bank of the Pactolus River. The sun is setting, casting a soft, forgiving light over the landscape. The water flows, clear and unburdened, its sands long ago stripped of their cursed gold by the relentless panning of the Lydians. The great tumulus of Gordian is a silent, sleeping hill on the horizon. The kingdom of Phrygia itself is a memory, a layer of dust and pottery beneath the soil, its name absorbed by Lydia, then Persia, then the vast, marching empires that followed. Time, the greatest of all rivers, has washed it all away. You walk to the place where the reeds once grew, the spot where the barber whispered his poison into the earth. There is nothing there now but common grass and a few hardy wildflowers. The reeds are gone. Perhaps they were cut down by a king's decree, or perhaps their strange vitality simply faded once their purpose was served, once the secret they held was no longer a secret. The wind still blows, but it carries only the scent of dust and time, the dry rustle of grass. The air is silent. The whisper is gone. The true unseen curse was never the gold, nor the ears. It was the failure to listen. It was the deafness of a man who could only hear the sound of his own wanted wealth. and could not hear the warning that came with it. He wanted to speak his mind and could not hear the context of divine power that surrounded him. He wanted to hide his shame and could not hear the freedom that lay in confession. His life was a series of auditory failures, and the gods, with their terrifying, poetic precision, simply gave him the ears to match his soul. In ancient Rome, when an emperor or other powerful figure was deemed an enemy of the state, the Senate could issue a damnatio memoria condemnation of memory. His name would be chiseled from inscriptions, his statues pulled down, his face removed from coins. It was an attempt to surgically remove a person from history, to create a perfect, silent void where they once had been. Midas suffered the opposite fate. His memory was not condemned. It was celebrated, but in a form so twisted that it became its own kind of damnation. His name is remembered not with a void, but with a false story, a story where the horrifying consequence of his greed is now seen as the ultimate aspiration. This is the last, soft whisper of his curse, a legacy that has forgotten its own lesson. You have journeyed through all the layers of his story, the myth, the history, the psychology, the sound. You have stood in the tomb and felt the quiet dignity of the real man. You have stood in the court and felt the suffocating weight of the secret. You have stood by the reeds and heard the birth of a rumor. You have seen how a simple story of a foolish king touches upon the nature of wealth, the burden of shame, the architecture of power, and the viral spread of an idea. The story is a keyhole through which you have glimpsed the vast, intricate machinery of human nature in the strange, echoing world of the gods. The sun dips below the horizon. The last light fades from the sky, and the first stars begin to appear, cold and distant. The tale is told. The whispers have fallen silent. Midas, the king of gold and whispers, has found his rest, both in the earth of his tomb and in the final resolution of his legend. But the question that remains, the last and softest whisper of this entire epic tale, is for you alone. What are the reeds whispering in your own life? What truths are spoken on the wind that you pretend not to hear? What Phrygian cap do you wear to hide the part of yourself you fear the world will ridicule? And what would happen? What chains would break if you found the courage to simply take it off? And now, let the story go. Let the mountains of Phrygia soften and dissolve into the darkness behind your eyes. The river's murmur fades into the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. The air grows still, and the tension in your shoulders can finally release, letting go of the ancient anxieties of kings and gods. There are no more riddles to solve, no more curses to unravel. The journey is over. The last echo has died away, leaving only a profound and gentle quiet in its place. The voices of Midas, of Apollo, of Dionysus, of the gossiping reeds, and the weeping poet all drift away like smoke on a windless night, returning to the silence from which they were born. You are left here, safe in your own space, in your own time, with nothing but the peaceful darkness and the steady beat of your own heart. The epic tale has ended, and its conclusion is this deep and welcome calm. Let the mind become as still as the water in the bottom of a well, reflecting only the serene and silent stars.